If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 161, Brothers and Relationships. The sweet aroma of Liberton cigars filled the grand meeting chamber aboard the Sweet Liberty. Through the viewport, distant stars twinkled like scattered diamonds against the void. 5 of the Emperor's sons had gathered here: Robert Guillemon, Sanguinius, Magnus, and Franklin Valorian engaged in animated discussion near the viewport, while Rogel Dorn and the recently discovered Lionel Johnson sat apart, sharing a quiet moment. Dorn sat ramrod straight in his artificer-crafted chair, his face an impassive mask as he regarded his newly found brother. "You wish to know of my experiences on Caliban, brother?" the Lion asked, his voice carrying an edge of careful measurement. "Yes." Dorn's response was characteristically blunt. "I find it prudent to understand the origins of all my brothers." The Lion's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yet you gather here, away from your duties. Does this not compromise the Great Crusade's efficiency? Why does our father permit such congregation aboard Franklin's vessel?" "No." Dorn's reply was immediate and certain. "Your concern is logical but incorrect. Franklin is an exceptional brother and leader. The Sweet Liberty could accommodate all 21 of us and our father comfortably. Its size is not merely ostentation, but practical necessity." "You speak of Franklin's leadership," the Lion observed, his tone carrying a note of skepticism. "Does he presume to lead in our father's stead?" Dorn's golden armor gleamed as he shifted slightly. "You misunderstand. Franklin was among the first to stand at our father's side. The Emperor frequently defers to his council on matters of great import. This is observable fact, not speculation." The Lion's gaze drifted to where Franklin was gesturing expressively, drawing a laugh from Sanguinius. "And what of this independence sector? Surely such autonomy poses a risk." Dorn took a deep drag from his cigar and let the smoke curl from his lips as he spoke. "It is his home system, once 300 worlds. Under Franklin's leadership, it is now 50,000 worlds strong. Recently, the Mechanicum and the sector signed a white peace. Their Cold War ended with the ascension of Belisarius Call to Fabricator General of Mars. Call, you see, is a close associate of Franklin. It is worth noting that Franklin's domain preserves Golden Age technology, not Dark Age, as is commonly misunderstood. The distinction is significant." The Lion leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "There must be more. Why would our father permit such concentration of power and knowledge outside his direct control?" "Yes." Dorn's simple response carried weight. "The Emperor's reasons are his own. However, if any of our brothers knows the full scope of our father's designs, it would be Franklin. Since the formation of what has been termed the League of Primarchs an accident of circumstance, the Emperor has granted us greater autonomy in prosecuting the crusade. This may be attributed to Franklin's influence, either directly or indirectly." "You mentioned another brother, Horus? How does he compare?" "Horus Lupercal commands the Luna Wolves. Franklin considers him a younger brother, though I advise discretion with this knowledge." Dorn's expression remained unchanged as he continued. "Both possess remarkable charisma, but their approaches differ fundamentally. Horus emulates our father's rigid command structure. Franklin advocates for independence within a strategic framework. He grants his followers autonomy, trusting them to carry out the larger plan without constant oversight. It is a style that most of us, myself included, find more palatable, though few would openly admit it. Except Russ, who would follow Franklin into a literal warp storm if asked." The Lion watched Franklin laugh at something Robert had said. "Why such loyalty?" "Resources and independence," Dorn stated plainly. "We are Primarches, the pinnacle of humanity's achievement. This engenders natural resistance to accepting authority from our equals. We follow our father out of duty and filial obligation and because he is our superior. Franklin provides resources and respects autonomy while maintaining the Emperor's confidence. His jovial demeanor does not diminish his serious approach to duty. What you observe is genuine, not artifice. You speak at unusual length about him, Rogel." "Yes. This is correct." The Lion fell silent, processing this wealth of information. His recent reunion with his legion had already presented numerous challenges, but this revelation about Franklin's influence and position added layers of complexity he hadn't anticipated. The implications were both fascinating and troubling. If Franklin ever turned against the Imperium, the consequences would be catastrophic. As if sensing his thoughts, Dorn added, "Your concern about potential betrayal is logical but ultimately unnecessary. Franklin's loyalty to humanity transcends even his loyalty to the Emperor. This is why our father trusts him. The sound of Franklin's booming laughter drew their attention. He was now demonstrating something to Magnus, his hands weaving patterns in the air that left faint traces of golden light. The Crimson King was nodding thoughtfully, clearly intrigued by whatever theorem or concept was being discussed. "Tell me, brother," the lion said finally, "what do you believe is our father's ultimate goal?" Dorn considered this for a long moment, his face as impassive as ever. "I believe our father seeks humanity's ascension. The method and means remain unclear to most. But observe Franklin's technological preservation, the mega-infrastructure projects in the Imperium, the Kadian Gate, the supply nodes, the galactic net, his careful balance of independence and unity, his gathering of brothers not just for war councils but for brotherhood itself." He gestured to the room. "This is not mere coincidence, the Emperor has trusted Franklin on uplifting the base of humanity's ascension." The lion watched as Franklin now pulled Robot into what appeared to be a friendly headlock, the Primarch of the Ultramarines showing uncharacteristic tolerance for such familiarity. Sanguinius's musical laughter rang out, while Magnus shook his head with obvious amusement. "And you trust this assessment?" the lion asked. "I do not deal in trust, brother. I deal in facts. The facts support my conclusion." Dorn raised his own cigar to his lips. "Franklin builds bridges between brothers who would naturally stand apart. He maintains technological advancement while respecting the Mechanicum's authority. He prosecutes the Great Crusade efficiently while fostering independence. These are not the actions of someone seeking power for its own sake." The lion absorbed this, his superhuman mind analyzing patterns and possibilities. "You suggest he is implementing some grand design." "I suggest nothing. I state what I observe. Franklin acts with purpose, yet never seeks to diminish our father's authority. He builds consensus rather than demanding compliance. These are observable facts." Their conversation was interrupted as Franklin called out across the room. "Rogel! Lion! Stop being antisocial and join us. Magnus is about to explain why theoretical physics is actually just spicy mathematics." Dorn stood with characteristic precision. "Our brother calls. It would be inefficient to refuse." The lion remained seated for a moment longer, watching as Dorn moved to join the others. Franklin immediately threw an arm around Dorn's shoulders, an action that would have earned swift rebuke from most Primarches. Yet Dorn merely stood, stoic as ever, though the lion thought he detected the slightest softening around his brother's eyes. Perhaps, the lion mused, there was something to be said for Franklin's methods after all. He rose and made his way to join his brothers, determined to observe and learn more about this unusual dynamic. The future of the Imperium might well depend on understanding it correctly. The dust of siege warfare still lingered in the air of Kadian, mixing with the acrid smell of spent ammunition and demolished fortifications. The 4th Legion stood in perfect formation, their gunmetal grey armor bearing the scars of their recent victory. They were the Emperor's siege masters, the breakers of walls, yet something unusual stirred in their ranks today: anticipation. Before them stood Franklin Valorian, the 11th Primarch, towering even among his transhuman captains. His presence here carried weight beyond mere ceremony. Every Astartes present knew the unspoken truth: Franklin Valorian was more than just another of the Emperor's sons. He was the Emperor's unofficial liaison, his trusted voice. When Franklin Valorian appeared, it meant the Emperor's eye had turned to watch. The assembled corpse grinders noted how he carried himself not with the cold distance of authority, but with the warm familiarity of one who understood their burden. His armor, though magnificent, bore signs of recent combat. He had not merely watched their siege, he had participated. "My brothers," Franklin's voice carried across the assembled ranks, its warmth a stark contrast to the typically grim atmosphere of siege warfare. "I have witnessed your work firsthand. The walls you have shattered, the fortifications you have claimed for humanity's future. While others might sing songs of glory won in open battle, it is your silent labor, your dedication that carves victory from stone itself." He paused, his eyes scanning the ranks. The 4th stood straighter under his gaze. Here was recognition they had long sought, not mere acknowledgement of their victories, but understanding of their purpose. "Others may see only the destruction in your wake, but I see the foundation you lay for humanity's future. You are not the shadow of the Imperium, as some might whisper. You are its bedrock, its unshakable foundation." At a gesture from Franklin, Director John Ezra stepped forward, activating a sophisticated holo display. the air filled with the ghostly blue images of siege engines that made even veteran siege masters draw sharp breaths. These were not mere improvements on existing designs, they were revelations in the art of siege warfare. Today, I bring you tools worthy of your mastery, Franklin continued, his voice carrying pride. But understand this, these are not gifts. I do not offer charity to the fourth. These are investments in your future, in the future you will build for humanity. Each weapon, each piece of technology, is a testament to my faith and the Emperor's faith in your purpose. The hollow display shifted, showing the weapons in action, demonstrating capabilities that seemed to bridge the gap between current Imperial technology and the legendary works of the Dark Age of technology. With these tools, you will not merely break walls, you will reshape the very foundations of worlds. The galaxy will remember the Fourth Legion not as simple siege masters, but as the unbroken vanguard of humanity's advance. Each fortress you breach opens another path for mankind's dominion. A murmur rippled through the ranks, not the usual stoic silence of the corpse grinders, but something more. Pride, perhaps, or the first stirrings of hope. Many among them had grown used to being viewed as tools, useful but unlovely. Franklin spoke to them as artisans, as masters of their craft. Franklin produced a data slate, its surface gleaming with the Imperial aquila. I carry with me a record of your victories, acknowledged and named by the Emperor himself. The siege we conclude today shall be recorded in Imperial history as the Iron Siege of Kadian, a testament to your mastery and dedication. The Fourth remained disciplined, but their pride was palpable. Their victories had names now, their achievements recognized not just in dry tactical reports but in the very histories of the Imperium. Turning to Horus, the first captain of the Fourth Legion, Franklin's voice carried a note of conspiracy, as if sharing a secret between brothers. First Captain, you'll want to designate someone to receive what comes next. The paperwork alone might constitute a siege in itself. A rare ripple of amusement passed through the ranks. Even Horus's stoic expression softened slightly as he nodded in acknowledgement. Franklin turned back to address the full assembly, his voice rising with the gravity of his next pronouncement. And as a personal mark of the Emperor's approval and recognition of your service, I am authorized to inform you that a Ramiles-class starfort will be transferred to 4th Legion's command. This announcement broke even 4th Legion's discipline. A cheer rose from the assembled ranks, quickly controlled but genuine. A starfort was more than a mere garrison post, it was a mobile fortress, a void-born citadel that would serve as both base and testament to their importance to the Great Crusade. Franklin allowed the moment to resonate, understanding the significance of this display of emotion from the usually stoic 4th Legion. In this moment, he had given them something many had thought forever beyond their reach, recognition not just of their utility, but of their worth. Captain Mikhail Algarian stood on the bridge of his merchant vessel Fortune's Gambit, watching as the void ahead seemed to shimmer. Where there had been empty space moments before, 3 vessels materialized, sleek, deadly, and impossibly advanced. His ship's augurs hadn't detected them at all, yet there they were, their gleaming hulls bearing the mark of the Independence Sector Fleet. Approaching merchant vessel, this is Independence Sector Defense Force. Maintain your current trajectory and prepare for standard inspection. Any deviation will be considered hostile action. The Vox transmission was crystal clear, lacking the usual static of void communications. Mikhail smiled slightly, even as his son Thomas fidgeted nervously beside him. First time seeing the sector fleet, boy. They just appeared, father. Our augurs didn't. Welcome to the Independence Sector, Mikhail chuckled. Where everything you think you know about technology becomes a child's tale. The inspection was, as Mikhail had anticipated, quick and clinical. He watched as a Valorian sector drone, some sleek, automated craft, performed scans of the Fortune's Gambit without ever boarding. They didn't even bother with imperial pomp or bureaucracy. Within the hour, they were cleared for entry and escorted toward the Valorian Trading Station Alpha. Thomas's jaw dropped as the station came into view. It wasn't just large, it was colossal. Its sweeping docks and spire-like hubs seemed to stretch endlessly, a city in the void where every inch was meticulously designed and gleaming with purpose. By the throne, Thomas whispered. Mikhail allowed himself a moment of pride in his son's awe. Now you see the difference between them and us. Imperial stations might be built to last, but this is built to impress. In the trading hall, they were greeted by a representative of the Valorian Giga Corporation. The man was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, exuding quiet confidence. His smile was practiced but faintly sardonic, as though he were already a step ahead of every merchant in the room. Captain Algarian, the man said warmly, extending a data slate. Welcome back to the Independence sector. Here is your preliminary tariff assessment. Thomas, standing just behind his father, leaned over to glimpse the figures. His eyes widened, and his breath caught in his throat. This is robbery. The representative's smile didn't falter. I assure you, young man, our tariffs are perfectly standard for the value of goods offered. Mikhail didn't even blink as he signed off on the payment. Thank you, he said, his tone neutral. Only years of experience kept his voice steady. The tariff was staggering, equivalent to the gross tithe of a minor merchant world. But he'd known what to expect. With a nod, the representative handed over a second data slate. This one was far more enticing, its pages filled with the sector's catalogue of goods. As Thomas scrolled through the offerings, his earlier indignation was swiftly replaced by astonishment. These prices! He murmured. Father, look at this. These medical kits, they could cure entire colonies. And these tools, they're practically miracles. We could mark these up tenfold and still undercut the rest of the sector. Mikhail nodded, keeping his expression carefully neutral. He understood the game all too well. With 500,000 worlds and an incalculable number of people across the Imperium, it didn't take much to offset the cost of the tariff. Just a handful of wealthy imperial governors purchasing these goods would easily cover the expense and leave plenty of profit to spare. Hours later, their holds were filled with goods that would make them a fortune several times over. Thomas still seemed torn between excitement and disbelief as they prepared to depart. Father, he said hesitantly as the station shrank in the distance, I don't understand. The tariffs are insane, but the goods are so cheap. What's the point? Are they trying to bleed us dry or make us rich? Mikhail smiled, pouring 2 glasses of amasec. He handed one to his son and motioned for him to sit. You've got the questions, lad, but you're missing the answers. Listen carefully. He took a slow sip before continuing. Franklin Valorian could crush us all. Don't doubt that for a second. The Independence sector could field its own merchant fleets, undercut us, and turn the entire Imperium's trade network into dust. But they don't. Why? Thomas shook his head. I don't know. Why? Balance. Mikhail tapped his glass against the table. Those tariffs? They're not just about making us pay. They're about reigning in their own corporations. The Primarch knows what unbridled greed can do. So he forces us to pay dearly to trade here, and in doing so, he keeps his corporations honest. We pay high tariffs, but the goods remain affordable for the people who need them most. But why not cut us out entirely? Because Franklin Valorian isn't just a leader. He's a builder. Those tariffs aren't just about control, they're about making us part of the system. Every merchant who trades here profits, sure. But more importantly, we become their allies. Their partners. If the Imperium ever tries to bring the sector to heel, who do you think will speak out against it? Thomas's brow furrowed. The merchants. The nobles. The people who rely on their goods. Exactly. Mikhail grinned. The Independence sector ensures that everyone who benefits from their trade has a stake in their independence. It's not about greed, it's about strategy. They've made us complicit in their freedom. And in return, Thomas said slowly, we fleece the nobility. The wheel turns, Mikhail agreed. We pay the tariffs, we sell the goods, and the nobles keep their comforts. Meanwhile, the people get better medicine, better tools, better lives. Everyone profits. Everyone stays invested. And the Independence sector? They stay free. Thomas stared out at the shrinking station, a newfound respect in his eyes. It's brilliant. Mikhail raised his glass. To Franklin Valorian, may his tariffs stay high, and his goods stay cheap. A/N, just this chapter to improve the world building whilst I brainstorm the next important arc. Chapter 162, When the New Meets the Old. Lord High Admiral George Ulysses stood atop the peak of a Ramillies-class star fort, its sheer enormity dwarfing the surrounding Imperial fleet stationed at the edge of the Segmentum Obscurus. The cold vacuum of space stretched endlessly before him, the starlight casting reflections on his pristine admiral's coat. Beneath his boots, the segmented panels of the observation deck hummed faintly with the rhythmic thrum of the station's plasma engines. It was moments like this, moments of relative stillness amidst the chaos of his duties, that allowed George the luxury of reflection. Born and raised in Nova Libertas, George had always known his life would be different from the typical imperial citizen. The Independence sector, with its egalitarian ethos and technological advancements, was an anomaly in the feudal tapestry of the Imperium. It was a place where merit trumped birthright, and innovation was lauded rather than stifled. Even now, decades after his ascension to the rank of Lord High Admiral, George couldn't help but contrast the efficiency of his homeland with the inefficiency that plagued the rest of the Imperium. Segmentum Obscurus, despite being an official part of the Greater Imperium, was unofficially the territory of Nova Libertas. The Independence sector's resources and infrastructure had transformed this once backwater segmentum into one of the most fortified and technologically advanced regions of the galaxy. The galactic net, a marvel of communication, allowed instantaneous coordination across the segmentum, something the rest of the Imperium could only dream of. The Imperial Navy here was larger, more lethal, and better equipped than any other segmentum's forces, and piracy had been all but eradicated under his watch. It was an achievement George was proud of, though he knew much of the credit belonged to the Independence sector's unwavering support. His unique position in the Libertas Senate further highlighted the duality of his life. As Lord High Admiral, he answered to both Terra and Nova Libertas. He held a permanent seat in the Senate, a rare honor that granted him a voice in the sector's governance. Yet, this dual allegiance also meant navigating the political minefield between the Greater Imperium's feudal bureaucracy and the Independence sector's democratic ideals. George's gaze shifted to the holographic map hovering before him. It displayed the sprawling expanse of Segmentum Obscurus, with glowing red markers denoting hostile Xenos territories. The Crave had been the latest threat, their insidious corruption spreading like a plague across entire systems. Yet, under his command, the Imperial Navy had eradicated them with brutal efficiency. The Crave were no match for the combined might of the Navy and the Liberty Eagles, Franklin Valorian's 11th Legion. The news that the 1st Legion, the Dark Angels, would be taking over Xenos extermination duties had left George uneasy. He had grown accustomed to working with the Liberty Eagles, whose professionalism and camaraderie aligned closely with his own values. The 11th Legion was efficient, adaptable, and, above all, reliable. They shared a mutual understanding with Nova Libertas, forged by years of cooperation and shared goals. In contrast, Lionel Johnson was an unknown quantity. As one of the newly rediscovered Primarches, his reputation preceded him, but reputations were often deceiving. Would the Lion bring the same level of coordination and respect to their efforts, or would his leadership style clash with the independence George cherished? The thought of starting anew, building a working relationship with a figure as enigmatic as Johnson, filled George with a sense of apprehension. A soft ping from his chrono snapped George from his thoughts. Glancing at the notification, he saw a request for safe passage from an Eldar craft world. Without hesitation, he approved it. This was routine by now since the great President Franklin Valorian had secured the Eldar's favor. Relations with the enigmatic Xenos had been surprisingly smooth. George found this development remarkable. The Eldar he had encountered so far were nothing like the pompous, arrogant beings described in imperial propaganda. Instead, they were measured, even cordial, in their dealings. He couldn't help but wonder what had changed. Was it Valorian's influence, or was there something unique about the way Segmentum Obscurus operated? Either way, it was a stark contrast to the horror stories he'd heard from other imperial officers, where Eldar had sneeringly referred to humans as Mundaki. Perhaps it was the independence of the sector, George mused. As George's thoughts wandered, they inevitably turned to the wider Imperium. Even in his 40s, the sheer disparity between Nova Libertas and the rest of the galaxy still baffled him. The independence sector was a beacon of progress, a testament to what humanity could achieve when freed from the chains of superstition and stagnation. In contrast, the Greater Imperium felt like a relic of a bygone age. The feudalistic structure of planetary governors and imperial nobles was the most glaring example of this inefficiency. Titles of nobility, passed down through bloodlines, seemed laughably archaic to someone raised in Nova Libertas. These governors and nobles wielded immense power yet accomplished so little, often more concerned with courtly intrigue and personal gain than the welfare of their people. George had lost count of the number of times these same nobles had groveled before him, seeking favors. They fawned over his position and influence, their flattery as transparent as it was pathetic. He had no doubt that many of them viewed him as an upstart, a man who had risen far above his station thanks to the quirks of Nova Liberta's meritocracy. Yet, they needed him, and that fact gave George no small amount of satisfaction. This was the reality of the Imperium, he realized. The age of strife and the cybernetic rebellion had shattered humanity's progress, leaving a civilization that clung to outdated systems out of fear and necessity. The fear of artificial intelligence, the so-called Men of Iron, had stunted technological advancement across the galaxy. While Nova Libertas did not had a cybernetic rebellion and have integrated AI into society as equals, the rest of the Imperium still saw such progress as heretical. Despite his disdain for the feudal system, George couldn't deny the opportunities it presented. As Lord High Admiral of Segmentum Obscurus, he held a position of immense power. With his permanent seat in the Libertas Senate and his ties to Terra, he had the means to build a dynasty that could rival even the most entrenched noble houses. It was a tempting thought. Power in the Imperium was a currency unlike any other, and George had an abundance of it. Yet, he also knew the dangers of succumbing to such ambitions. The Eagle was always watching. 847.30 m. Terra, Palace of Navigators. The domed council chamber of the Paternova's palace on Terra was a monolithic testament to the ancient glory of the Novus Nobilite. Obsidian columns lined the vast hall, adorned with bas-reliefs of ancient navigators charting the warp, their expressions etched in timeless arrogance. At the room's center stood a circular table, its polished surface reflecting the golden light streaming from the stained glass depiction of the imperial aquila above. Around the table sat the leaders of the magisterial, nomadic, shrouded, and renegade houses novators of the navigator dynasties, each bearing the weight of centuries-old legacies. At the head of the table sat the Paternova, cloaked in flowing robes of deep indigo, his warp eye concealed beneath an elaborate, rune-etched mask. The air was tense, thick with the unspoken dread of what had brought them all here. For decades, the independence sector had remained an enigmatic yet growing threat, defying the conventions that had ensured the navigator house's dominance over interstellar travel for 20 millennia. They can trace their origins from the dark age of technology and had weathered the age of strife as well as the cybernetic rebellion. They had weathered many catastrophes, but now, their very existence was at stake. The Paternova's voice, deep and resonant, broke the silence. Novators of the Novus Nobilite, you are summoned here today not for ceremony, but survival. The independence sector grows bolder with each passing year. They spurn the warp, disregard the navigators, and mock the traditions that have upheld the Imperium. 40 years ago, they were a rediscovered anomaly. Today, they represent a threat to our extinction. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several novators exchanged uneasy glances, their ornate attire shimmering under the golden light. The Paternova's envoy, Bolem Hardiker, a gaunt figure clad in scarlet, stepped forward, holding a gilded data slate. Reports confirm the independence sector no longer relies on warp drives. Their vessels operate on a technology we do not understand, engines that harness relativistic light, bypassing the warp entirely. Furthermore, their galactic net continues to supplant astropathic choirs, spreading their influence across the Imperium without our involvement. Even Mars, under Belisarius' call, has formed an alliance with them. The envoy paused, his hollow eyes scanning the room. This is not merely a challenge to our dominance. It is the end of the Novus Nobilite as we know it. A novator from a magisterial house, resplendent in golden robes, rose to his feet. His warp eye glinted beneath a translucent veil, lending an air of otherworldly menace to his words. We cannot let this stand. The independence sector's disregard for our role in the Imperium is an affront to everything we represent. I propose we strike at the heart of this rebellion, assassinate Franklin Valorian himself. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Another novator, this one from a nomadic house, stood abruptly. Her silver-threaded robes swirled as she slammed a hand on the table. Are you mad? To even suggest such a thing is treason of the highest order. Franklin Valorian is a Primarch, a son of the Emperor. To strike at him is to invite annihilation upon all our houses. The golden-clad novator sneered. And what do you suggest, then? Wait and do nothing while the independence sector renders us obsolete? In 100 years, there will be no Novus Nobilite, no warp travel, no navigator houses. We will be relics of a forgotten age. A novator from a shrouded house leaned forward, his gaunt face framed by the shadows of his hood. His voice was low, measured, yet laced with venom. There is another way. We appeal to the Council of Terra, to the imperial nobles under them, rally them against the independence sector's blatant reliance on artificial intelligence. The Mechanicum of Mars may have abandoned us, but there are still those within the Imperium who view AI with suspicion. We can turn this upheaval to our advantage. A ripple of agreement spread among some of the novators, but a voice of dissent rose from the far end of the table. The speaker, a novator from a renegade house, smirked as he tapped a clawed finger on the table. Appeal to the nobles? Laughable. The independence sector would mock such an attempt. Their alliance with Mars has made them untouchable, and their technology far surpasses anything we can hope to match. Do you truly believe Franklin Valorian fears the protests of outdated aristocrats? The chamber grew heated as voices overlapped, each novator attempting to outshout the other. Finally, a gravelly voice cut through the noise. Appeal to the Emperor, a novator suggested, his tone tinged with desperation. Laughter erupted from several corners of the room. Another novator, her crimson robes shimmering like blood, sneered. Appeal to the Emperor? What a joke! The Emperor won Terra through sheer might and ancient archaeotech. His fleet operates independently of our houses, and his custodians would crush us before we even reached him. Do not forget he has already adopted the Independence Sector's technology. He has no need for us. The Paternova raised a hand, silencing the room. His voice was calm, but there was a steely edge to it. What progress have we made in influencing the Independence Sector's economy? A novator from House Belisarius, his expression grim, rose to speak. None, Your Excellency. Our attempts to infiltrate their markets have only solidified Franklin Valorian's position. In response to our efforts, he created the Valorian Giga Corporation, a monolithic entity that obstructs our every move. We are locked out of their economy entirely. It's as if he is 3 steps ahead. The Paternova's single exposed eye opened. It was not a human eye. The room fell into absolute silence. Then we have but one choice. Die today or die a century from now, it makes no difference. The Independence Sector will destroy us unless we act. If they will not yield to diplomacy, we must eliminate Franklin Valorian. To kill a Primarch, one novator whispered, is to invite total annihilation. To do nothing, the Paternova responded, guarantees our extinction. The verdict was unambiguous. They would first attempt to leverage their status, but if that failed, they would resort to eliminating Franklin Valorian. Consequences be damned. A nervous novator, his voice thick with disbelief and dread, finally spoke up. How can we even hope to kill a Primarch? He asked, his words faltering as the weight of the question hung in the air. We're not just talking about any man, we're speaking of a demigod, the leader of the largest industrial empire in the galaxy. The Valorian Giga Corporation spans all 5 segmentums, with Obscurus alone holding the highest concentration of resources. If we strike against him, we risk sparking an outright war of secession, one we might not survive. The Paternova's answer was as cold and unflinching as the rest of his demeanor: kill him. The novator, visibly shaken, was dragged away, but not before shouting defiantly, you're all fools. You overestimate the power of the navigator houses, terribly so. The Paternova's gaze lingered as the doors slammed shut, silencing the rebellious voice. He then turned to the assembled novators, his tone unwavering. Should Valorian die, without a doubt, the Independence Sector will descend into chaos. We must seize this window of opportunity to capture critical assets and extend our influence into the sector. But first, the Primarch must fall. He must die if we are to survive. If he lives, our houses will remain in jeopardy. If he dies, our reign remains unchallenged. The port of Nova Libertas thrummed with the mechanical symphony of interstellar commerce, a cacophony of hydraulic seals, plasma conduits, and the low-resonant hum of starship reactors. Amidst this orchestration of technological might, Private Anthony of the Independence Sector Defense Force stood as a singular note of quiet vigilance, his Liberty pattern combi bolter hanging from its tactical sling like a sacred instrument of war. The Space Wolves battle fleet had arrived 3 solar cycles prior, their massive vessels each a cathedral of destruction now moored in the expansive dockyards. Massive umbilicals connected these iron behemoths to the station's life support systems, trading nutrients, ammunition, and the unspoken currency of military camaraderie. Jonathan Morgan, a solar auxilia trooper with eyes that had witnessed the cold mathematics of imperial warfare, approached with the measured steps of a soldier unused to planetary gravity. His lasgun, a standard-issue weapon that spoke more of bureaucratic efficiency than martial innovation, hung at his side like a reluctant companion. "Excuse me," Jonathan called, his voice carrying the dusty timbre of 1,000 campaign worlds. "Might you direct me toward local sustenance? Ship rations have become less than inspiring." Anthony's laugh was sharp, unexpected, a human sound that seemed almost incongruous within the metallic cathedral surrounding them. "Nutrient paste? Hell no. Follow me, brother. The Independence Sector doesn't just feed soldiers, we celebrate them." The fast food establishments lined the port's commercial thoroughfare like shrines to a more mundane pantheon. KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, names that predated the Imperium itself, preserved like relics of human cultural memory. Anthony gestured expansively, his augmented musculature a testament to the genetic engineering that defined the Liberty Guard, moving with fluid precision. 2 credits, he said, pulling out a meal card. My treat. Consider it interregimental diplomacy. Jonathan's skepticism melted into something resembling wonder as a steaming portion of Terran-style poultry was placed before him. This tastes like something my grandmother might have prepared, he murmured, the words carrying more emotion than 1,000 battlefield reports. Their conversation drifted, as conversations between soldiers often do, a combination of technical precision and human meandering. But when Jonathan's gaze settled on Anthony's weapon, his entire demeanor shifted. That bolter, he said, reverence and curiosity intertwining. It's different. Anthony's hands moved with practiced grace, revealing the weapon's intricate design. Liberty Pattern Combi Bolter, he explained, each word a technical hymn. 3 barrels, each a universe of destructive potential. He pointed to each in turn: bottom barrel for traditional explosive rounds. Middle barrel pulse projectiles with electromagnetic acceleration. Top barrel? Pure Folkite energy, focused like a blade of light. Jonathan listened, transfixed. The weapon was more than metal and circuits, it was a statement of technological philosophy. Dual energy systems, he breathed. Recoil dampeners integrated into the core. You libertans, you don't just make weapons. You craft technological sonnets. His own lasgun suddenly felt like a crude implement, a pencil beside an artist's brush. Requisition 1. Anthony chuckled, the sound rich with understanding. Imperial bureaucracy would sooner order a tank painted pink than approve such a marvel. They laughed, a sound that echoed through the port, momentarily drowning out the mechanical heartbeat of the dockyard. A moment of pure, unfiltered humanity amidst the grand cosmic struggle. Perhaps we'll meet again, Anthony offered as Jonathan prepared to depart. Unlikely, Jonathan responded, but there was no malice. Only the pragmatic understanding of soldiers who know the universe is vast and capricious. As the Solar Auxilia trooper walked away, Anthony watched another moment preserved in the infinite tapestry of human experience, a fragment of connection in a galaxy of infinite conflict. The port continued its eternal rhythm. Starships breathed. Weapons hummed. Humanity endured. Chapter 163, Movements and Reactions. The report from Draken Nazir arrived with a flourish, the cold light of Camaraka's perpetual twilight glinting off his polished armor. He knelt before Lady Malice, his movements sharp and precise, reflecting the ruthless efficiency that had earned him her favor. His words spilled forth in clipped, measured tones, detailing the clandestine dealings of the navigator houses and their perilous schemes against Franklin Valorian. When he finished, the oppressive silence of the throne room was broken by Malice's laughter, a sound as sharp and dangerous as the edge of a clave. It rang out like the chime of breaking glass, cutting through the stillness with a blend of amusement and disdain. Scheming little rats, she murmured, her lips curving into a sly smirk. The Imperium's vaunted navigator houses are no better than the archons of Camarak, writhing in shadows, slipping knives between ribs. How quaint that they aim for Franklin Valorian's head. They will shatter their blades on his smirk alone. Her words hung in the air like venom as she rose from her throne. The silken folds of her robes, dyed in hues of iridescent blue and green, swirled around her in a display of predatory grace. She descended the dais, each step deliberate, her presence commanding and lethal. And what of our arrangements with the so-called Lord of Camarak? She asked, her voice light, yet laced with malice. What of Vect? Nazir's tone remained measured, his posture unyielding. Everything is prepared, my lady. All that remains is to release the truth of Asdrubal Vect's hand in the burning of old Camarak. The fury of every denizen, every homunculus, will ignite like dry tinder. They will tear him apart as chimerae do a wounded beast. The Archon of the Black Heart will find no sanctuary, not even in his own shadow. Malice's chuckle was low and rich, resonating with amusement at the image Nazir painted. She reached up, brushing gloved fingers against the delicate circlet resting on her brow, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. An upheaval, indeed, she mused, her voice soft as silk. Vect's death will send ripples through the webway. The cabal of the Black Heart will collapse like a crumbling spire, its pieces claimed by the vultures of Camarak. She paused, her smirk fading into a contemplative expression. But Camarak is ever a place of hunger, of endless ambition. For every Archon we remove, 10 more will rise, each more ravenous than the last. Nazir remained silent, a shadow in her presence, awaiting her next command. Malice began to pace, her sharp heels clicking against the obsidian floor like the ticking of a death clock. If the cabal of the poisoned tongue is to rise to dominance amidst this upheaval, our position must be unassailable. Numbers, equipment, and alliances. Her voice turned colder. The Blackheart's strength must become ours. Yet, obstacles remain. Her gaze grew sharper, more calculating. Vet-grown warriors will suffice to swell our ranks. But equipment, there lies the thorn. Estrachromis. That spiteful creature would rather see Camarac ablaze than cede control of the arms trade. And to outmaneuver her. Her steps slowed, her pace stilled. A flicker of inspiration crossed her face, her lips parting ever so slightly. She tilted her head, her fingers brushing against her lips in a rare moment of contemplation. An answer, she whispered, the words almost lost in the stillness of the chamber. How ironic that the solution to our internal squabbles lies outside the labyrinth of the webway. A certain someone. An old friend. Nazire's gaze flickered with curiosity, though he dared not interrupt her thoughts. Malice turned to face him fully, the gleam of cunning in her eyes matched by the wicked curve of her smile. Arrange a meeting with Franklin Valorian, she commanded, her voice as sharp and certain as the bite of a blade. The Lord of Liberty, master of a military-industrial complex that could arm the segmentum obscurus twice over and still have surplus to spare. Who better to solve our little predicament? Nazire's bow was deep and fluid. As you wish, my lady. It shall be done. He rose swiftly and retreated, leaving Malice alone with her thoughts. Her smirk lingered as she leaned against the edge of her throne, one hand resting lightly on its intricately carved armrest. Franklin Valorian. A name that resonated even in the darkest recesses of the webway. The Primarch who had razed old Camarac to the ground. Malice's gaze turned inward as she considered the implications of reaching out to him now. Valorian was no stranger to Camarac's treacherous labyrinth, nor to her own brand of cunning. Their paths had crossed before, a careful balancing act of intrigue, power, and thinly veiled amusement. She chuckled softly, the sound low and resonant. Her fingers traced the curve of her lips, recalling their past exchanges. There had always been something deliciously infuriating about Franklin Valorian, his unshakable confidence, his refusal to be baited by her games. A frustrating equal, yet undeniably useful. The dry winds of the newly conquered frontier world swept across the barren plains as Franklin Valorian holstered the last word, the smoking barrel still warm from dispatching the last drukari raider. Around him, the Liberty Eagles secured the webway portal that had served as the enemy's entry point, marking it for future fortification. This once forgotten solar system was now designated as a fortress system, a critical bulwark against future incursions. In the distance, the remnants of a drukari vessel exploded in the upper atmosphere, its fiery demise reflected in Franklin's unwavering brown eyes. The sound of slow, deliberate clapping broke through the air, incongruous amidst the dying embers of battle. Franklin's smirk vanished as he turned, the last word drawn once more, its aim unerringly fixed on the forehead of the intruder. Standing before him was Lady Malice, her elegant figure draped in the intricate silks of her station, adorned with jewels that shimmered like starlight. Despite the weapon aimed at her, her expression was one of amusement. "You wouldn't kill your business partner, would you now, Franklin?" she asked, her tone light and mocking, yet carrying an undercurrent of tension. Franklin's voice was calm but laced with steel. "That depends. Said business partner has a reputation for having me clean up her rivals by conveniently providing their locations and rating patterns." Lady Malice stepped forward, unfazed by the deadly weapon mere inches from her forehead. Her gaze met his, unflinching. "Shoot, why don't you?" she taunted, placing herself directly in the line of fire. For a brief moment, her confidence wavered as her keen senses detected something far more profound in Franklin's eyes. The searing presence of a god's gaze bore down upon her soul. It was not the cold, consuming hunger of Slaanesh, which she had felt countless times before, but the fiery and unrelenting wrath of Kadian. It felt as if her very essence stood on the edge of a blade, a single misstep away from immolation. Franklin's voice, sharp and commanding, snapped her from her reverie. "What is it that you want, Aurelia? Surely goading me into shooting a business partner isn't part of why you're here. Or have you suddenly decided to join Kadian's eternal host?" Lady Malice's lips curled into a sly smile. "Nothing so theological, Franklin. I have a business proposition, something that would benefit us both. But I need your support." Franklin lowered the weapon slightly but did not holster it, his posture exuding both authority and caution. "Business? I thought we already had an understanding, Aurelia. The criminals of the Imperium are sent to you and your cabal, and in exchange, you fuck off and reveal future rates of the drukari. Malice chuckled, her laughter as smooth as silk. Yes, that was our agreement. But I wish to take it further. Let's say I plan to target Vect and take his place and ascend to power. Aurelia Malice, Supreme Overlord of Camaraderie. Sounds good, doesn't it? Franklin shook his head, a grimace of disapproval crossing his features. To my ears, it sounds like a disaster. I'm perfectly fine with the current state of Camaraderie, a fractured, self-devouring cesspool where the rabble is easier to deal with. Even a figurehead like you at the top would complicate things. Malice's smile remained, though her eyes hardened. You misunderstand, Franklin. I don't seek to unite Camaraderie, that would be both impossible and undesirable. I aim to replace Vect, to control the Black Heart, and to bring a measure of predictability to its chaos. Under my rule, the infighting would remain, but it would be chaos that I control. Franklin's brow furrowed, his arms crossing over his chest as he considered her words. And what exactly do I gain from this little power play of yours? I don't make investments without a guaranteed return. Malice's tone turned sharp, her voice dropping to a lower, more serious register. Stability. Under Vect, the Black Heart remains a constant threat to your independence sector. His spies infiltrate your worlds even now. By supporting me, you gain a ruler who values our partnership. I'd ensure Camaraderie remains fractured, its rival cabals too busy fighting amongst themselves to pose a real threat to your borders. Franklin's eyes narrowed. And what stops you from turning on me once you've solidified your power? Malice stepped closer, her voice soft but dripping with irony. Trust, Franklin. Not trust born of friendship or loyalty, but trust in my pragmatism. I'm not Vect. I don't seek to dominate the galaxy or challenge you. I've seen what you're capable of, and I have no desire to end up like those raiders you just obliterated. Our interests align. Surely you can see that. Franklin's smirk returned, though it lacked warmth. Nice try, Aurelia. But I find it highly undesirable for the Drukari to be united, even under a figurehead. Resources are not an issue for me, I have the entire galaxy as my treasure trove. What's a little city in the webway compared to that? Think again. Malice's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Perhaps I can sweeten the deal. The Novus Nobilite, the great navigator houses, plan to assassinate you. They've finally been pushed to the brink. Franklin chuckled, the sound low and dangerous. I already know. In fact, I'm surprised they haven't moved sooner. If this is the only card you have to play, Aurelia, then let's end this meeting. I have more important matters to attend to than aiding your little power grab. But Malice wasn't done. Her next words stopped Franklin in his tracks. The webway gates. The webway itself, Franklin. There's been an awful lot of movement from Imperial forces within it, toward an abandoned webway city Kalistar. Franklin's gaze sharpened, his attention fully on her now. Kalistar. Lady Malice nodded, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Yes. The way to Kalistar is heavily fortified, and to think the Emperor could hide it through the many folds of the webway. The amount of your men of iron sentinels guarding it is astounding. It's an impenetrable fortress to most Necron, Chaos, or any other Xenos species. All but Drukari. The ground beneath her feet trembled as spectral hands rose from the earth, grasping at her ankles. Blades of flame appeared in a circle around her, their heat palpable. Malice's sharp mind recognized them for what they were, the souls of dead Eldar, now bound to Kadian. Franklin knelt, his smirk gone, his expression deadly serious. This knowledge makes you too dangerous to live, Aurelia, he said, his voice low and cold. Malice's heart raced, though her exterior remained composed. If you kill me, she said, her voice trembling slightly but still defiant, my informants will ensure this knowledge reaches the ruinous powers. I know your little skirmishes with them, Franklin. Franklin studied her for a moment, his thoughts racing. Finally, he sighed and drew an arrow. The blade's edge gleamed with a deadly light as he stabbed her through the abdomen. She gasped, expecting death, but instead felt something else. What did you do? She demanded, her voice sharp with confusion. Franklin's smirk returned, this time full of grim amusement. I had Kadian mark you, he said simply. Think of it as a failsafe. You're free to live, Aurelia, but if you betray me or spread word of Kalistar, the consequences will be unpleasant. Malice's eyes widened as she realized the truth of his words. She could feel it, the weight of the god's mark upon her soul. Franklin rose to his full height, towering over her. "You've been paying too much attention to my movements lately, Aurelia," he said, his tone almost conversational. "Be careful. Curiosity can be fatal. Let's talk about this next time, I have more important business to attend to." In the heart of the Imperial Palace, where reality bent to accommodate humanity's greatest achievements, the Eternity Gate blazed with otherworldly energies. Through its impossible aperture stepped Franklin. The throne room, vast beyond mortal comprehension, seemed to contract around the three figures who now occupied its sacred space: the Emperor of Mankind, Malkador the Sigil Light, and the Liberator himself. The Emperor stood like a sun-given form, his golden armor drinking in the light until it seemed to pulse with its own inner radiance. His face, when turned to his son, held the weight of epochs yet to come. Beside him, Malkador's staff touched the ground with a sound that echoed through dimensions, his aged form belying the cosmic power that coursed through his ancient frame. "Pops, Mal," Franklin's greeting carried the casual confidence that had become his trademark, though his eyes held a predator's calculating gleam. "So, what's our move?" Malkador exchanged a glance with the Master of Mankind, his cowled face impossible to read. "How are the preparations?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a burning world. Franklin's response came with the precision of a well-maintained bolter. "The prognosticators and void abacuses are ready for deployment. Unlike our current solutions, they don't require the Astronomican's guidance to pierce the warp's veil." His lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. "More reliable too. Less prone to mutation or political ambitions." The Emperor's nod carried the weight of worlds. In that simple gesture lay the death warrant for an entire class of humanity's ancient nobility. The navigators, those three-eyed seers who had guided humanity's ships since the age of technology, had become a cancer in the body of the Imperium, too powerful, too entrenched, too necessary. Until now. The legal groundwork must be immaculate. The Emperor's voice resonated with harmonics that made reality itself vibrate in sympathy. The novice nobilite's influence extends deep into Terra's bedrock. Their role in humanity's expansion during the Federation era cannot be dismissed without proper cause. Franklin's grin widened, showing teeth that seemed almost metallic in the chamber's ethereal light. "The power vacuum won't last long enough for chaos or other political powers to take root. The Mechanicum stands ready. Fabricator General Call himself has pledged support to our initiative. Between Mars and the Independence sector, we'll have seized their territories and assets, before the Navigator house's corpses grow cold." Malkador's aged fingers tightened on his staff, psychic energy crackling subtly around its head. "They will attempt diplomacy one last time," he said, each word measured with millennia of political acumen. "Your refusal will spark their desperate gambit, assassination attempts against a Primarch. Giving us our casus belli," Franklin finished, understanding blooming in his eyes. "The attempted murder of a Primarch, the Emperor's own son. No one could deny the justice of our response." The Emperor moved, and reality seemed to bend around him. "The navigators have served humanity for 20 millennia, but their time has passed. Like so many relics of the dark age of technology, they have become a shackle rather than an aid. Their mutations grow worse with each generation, their political power more entrenched, their demands more egregious." Franklin leaned back slightly, his mind already analyzing the likely sequence of events. "They've been growing increasingly desperate," he remarked. "They've seen the writing on the wall. With the advent of the void abacus and prognosticators, their relevance is fading. Once this transition begins, their resistance will only grow." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, his voice a quiet rumble of authority. "Their obsolescence is inevitable, but we must not underestimate their capacity for destruction in their death throes. If they are not dealt with decisively, they will become a barrier to the Webway project and the future of humanity. Their plotting against you, my son, is all the reason we need to act." Franklin nodded, a determined smile tugging at his lips. When the new meets the old, it always ends with the ancient ways burning out in a blaze. The Emperor allowed a flicker of amusement to cross his features, the corner of his mouth barely lifting. Malkador, ever the pragmatist, folded his arms and inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement of the sentiment. Franklin saluted sharply, his hand crossing his chest in a gesture of deference. "I'll ensure everything is ready," he said, his tone resolute. "Once they make their move, we'll have all the justification we need to proceed." The Emperor spoke once more, his words carrying the weight of finality. "Go, my son. Prepare. The old must make way for the new." Franklin inclined his head in respect, turning sharply on his heel and striding back toward the Eternity Gate. The golden light of the throne room seemed to dim slightly as the weight of the coming conflict settled upon him. As Franklin Valorian stepped aboard the resplendent bridge of Sweet Liberty, the sovereign AI, Sweet Liberty's central AI, materialized as an eagle at the central console. Lord Valorian, Sovereign's voice was as crisp as ever, I have received a communication. The Paternoval envoy, Bolum Hardiker, has requested an audience with you on the planet Balam, near the galactic rim of Segmentum Pacificus. Franklin's smirk grew into a sly grin as he adjusted his ceremonial cloak. His voice carried an undertone of amused sarcasm as he turned to address his gathered Primarch captains, each a paragon of strength and intelligence. Say, what do you think Bolum could possibly want from me? A heartfelt apology for the novice nobilites plotting? Or perhaps he's decided to surrender and name me the new Paternova. Maybe he's coming to offer you a lifetime membership to their exclusive warp travel club, Denzel quipped, his grin infectious. Free warp transits for life if you promise not to make them obsolete. Armstrong leaned back, his tone dripping with mock seriousness. Nat, I'll bet he's here to challenge you to an arm wrestling match. Primarch versus, whatever he thinks he is. Winner gets control of the galaxy. Henry Cavill joined in, his voice laced with dry wit. Or perhaps he's here to propose a truce on one condition. You agree to star in their next propaganda piece, The Last Navigator Standing. I hear they're desperate for a leading man. Franklin chuckled, his smirk growing wider. Henry, if they wanted a show, they'd need a far better script than the tired drivel they've been peddling. Vladimir Mendeleev adjusted his collar, his delivery as precise as his intellect. My analysis suggests he's here to request a generous loan. The navigator houses, after all, are experiencing liquidity issues. Outdated warp charts don't pay the bills. Director John Ezra gave a knowing smirk. I'm betting he's here to invite you to a grand banquet. Poisoned wine optional, of course. Don't worry, I'll have the tasters ready. Samuel L. Jackson crossed his arms, his voice booming over the din. Hell no. He's not here to beg or barter. He's here because he knows their ass is grass, and you're the goddamn lawnmower. Franklin chuckled, his smirk never wavering. Let's go see what he's got to say before we liquidate them, of course. The bridge filled with a chorus of amused murmurs and nods of approval. With a casual wave of his hand, Franklin signaled the crew. The command echoed through the pristine halls of Sweet Liberty, and within moments, the mighty battle fleet Liberty surged into motion. The colossal fleet disappeared in a brilliant flash of relativistic light, leaving behind only the faint hum of displaced space as it tore through the stars, heading for their next encounter with destiny. Chapter 164, Treachery and Purge. The battle fleet Liberty loomed above the tranquil planet of Balam, its sleek ships casting ominous shadows across the system's celestial canvas. On board the flagship Sweet Liberty, Franklin Valorian's expression was as confident as ever, his mind already calculating the moves that would follow. Before departing, he gave his Primarch captains their orders: once the action starts, leave none alive. His Stormbird sliced through the atmosphere, descending toward an open field dominated by a lavish open-air tent. Franklin's sharp eyes noted the strategic placement of potential sniper nests, a subtle acknowledgement of the treachery awaiting him. Standing prominently before the tent was Bolum Hardiker, the Paternoval envoy, his demeanor betraying a thinly veiled desperation masked as diplomacy. As Franklin disembarked, he strode toward Bolum with an air of casual confidence. The two clasped hands, their expressions a stark contrast. Bolum's was tense, Franklin's was unreadable. A nice morning, isn't it? Bolum began with forced geniality. Franklin's smirk deepened. It is, envoy. Now, what brings you to this remote corner of the galaxy? Bolum wasted no time. Let's cut to the chase, Lord Primarch. The Paternova and the entirety of the novice nobilite are prepared to place themselves in your debt if you delay your plans indefinitely. Whatever you ask, the navigator houses will gladly answer. Franklin let the offer hang in the air for a moment before responding, his tone measured yet edged with amusement. Bolum, that's not how deals are struck. A true agreement benefits both parties. Let me counter with this: embrace the inevitable. Tell your Paternova that the age of reliance on mutations and monopolized warp travel is over. My father's vision for humanity demands independence from such constraints. The prognosticators and void abacuses are merely transitional measures. Join us. Bolum's face hardened. He sighed deeply, his resignation palpable. Then we have war, he declared, his voice shifting as his form began to melt and twist. The envoy's flesh contorted unnaturally, revealing the lithe, serpentine figure of a Calidus assassin. She lunged at Franklin with liquid grace, her polymorph blade aimed for his throat. But Franklin had already anticipated the attack. He sidestepped fluidly, his movements precise as a sniper's shot whistled past him. Without hesitation, he raised his pistol, the last word, and fired at the distant glint of the Vindicator's perch. Even as the shot rang out, a tingle rippled through his senses, the unmistakable presence of a blank. The battlefield erupted into chaos. From the shadows, a Culexus assassin emerged, its null field suppressing Franklin's psychic potential. At the same time, an Everzer charged toward him, its skull-like visage glowing red with lethal intent. Franklin drew an Aeris, in one seamless motion. The Calidus's blade clashed against the shimmering edge of an Aeris, but her assault was short-lived. With a single devastating strike, Franklin bisected her, her lifeless form crumpling to the ground. The Culexus unleashed a psychic barrage, its soul-annihilating energy crashing against Franklin's void shields. A shot from the Vindicator followed, overloading the shields entirely. The quantum shielding kicked in just in time, absorbing what would have been a fatal strike. Franklin's response was immediate. He unleashed a volley of homing smart missiles, their deadly trajectories locking onto the Vindicator's position. The Everzer closed the gap with terrifying speed, its power weapons slashing with inhuman ferocity. Franklin parried the strikes, his strength and precision sending the frenzied assassin hurtling backward. The last word barked again, its lethal round finding the head of the Culexus and reducing it to a gruesome mist. The psychic suppression lifted instantly, and Franklin's awareness expanded, detecting yet another foe. An Adamus assassin darted toward him, its Nemesis blade honed for a decapitating strike. Franklin chuckled, even as he deflected the deadly attack. An execution force? The navigator houses have been busy. Malkador will be livid when he hears about this. The Grand Master of Assassins could not control his own assassins. The Adamus struck with blistering speed, but Franklin's reflexes were unparalleled. He fired the last word mid-parry, the bullet piercing the assassin's chest and detonating in a burst of kinetic force. The Adamus disintegrated in a violent explosion, leaving only the Everzer to contend with. The Everzer fired its executioner pistol, melter rounds splaying harmlessly off Franklin's quantum shields. Undeterred, it leapt forward, its power weapons aimed directly for Franklin's chest. This time, the assassin's strike connected, the energy weapons gouging into his armor. Franklin's smirk didn't falter. He grabbed the Everzer by its head, his voice dripping with amused disdain. "That's all you could manage? Rejoice, for you are the sole mortal to land a hit on me." With a sickening crunch, Franklin crushed the Everzer's skull, its lifeless body convulsing as the biomeltdown process began. The assassin's corpse exploded in a blinding flash, the force akin to a plasma bomb. When the light subsided, Franklin stood unscathed, his quantum shield shimmering faintly amidst the newly formed crater. He dusted himself off, his expression unfazed. "I wasn't expecting a biomeltdown, but this is the Officio Assassinorum we're dealing with, after all." Franklin Valorian's command bridge aboard Sweet Liberty was alive with activity as a secure transmission came through from none other than Fabricator General Belisarius Call. A hollow image of the ancient, sprawling techno-savant materialized before Franklin. Call's voice, a mechanical symphony of tones and inflections, echoed across the chamber. "Ah, Lord Valorian. It seems our esteemed allies have decided to extend their hospitality in the form of assassins. Have you had the pleasure of such company recently?" Franklin's perpetual smirk grew slightly. He leaned back in his command chair, radiating confidence. "Call, you could say that. A Calidus, a Vindicator, a Culexus, an Everzer, and even an Adamus decided to crash my meeting on Balam. Let's just say they didn't leave in one piece." Call's photonic eyes brightened with interest. "Impressive. They must have deemed you a high-value target indeed to deploy such resources. I, too, had the pleasure of entertaining 4 assassins. One even managed to disable my secondary cogitator network temporarily." "How quaint." Franklin raised an eyebrow. "Temporarily? Let me guess, you've already adapted to counter their methods." Call's mechanical limbs clattered as he gestured in what could only be described as a shrug. "Of course. Their tactics were predictable once analyzed. On a related note, I've observed that the Sigil Light appears to have tightened his control over the Assassinorum, likely to avoid further such inconveniences." Franklin chuckled. Sounds like Mal is trying to keep the leash tight. Can't have the dogs running wild, can we? Call's voice took on a slightly teasing tone, a rare glimpse of humor in the ancient Mechanicum's personality. Speaking of leashes, I must commend the independence sector. Your innovations are outpacing expectations. The void abacuses and prognosticators are being adopted far more swiftly than I projected. Franklin leaned forward, his smirk turning into a playful grin. You snooze, you lose, Call. We're pioneers here. If you can't keep up, that's on you. Call's photonic eyes dimmed briefly, a gesture akin to a human narrowing their eyes. An interesting sentiment, Primarch. However, I should inform you that while you were handling assassins and philosophical debates with the navigator houses, the Mechanicum has secured over 40% of their assets. It seems, my dear Lord Valorian, that it was you who was snoozing. The transmission abruptly ended, leaving Franklin staring at the now blank hollow console. His smirk shifted to a bemused shake of the head. That cheeky coghead, he muttered, a hint of admiration in his voice. Just then, the voice of First Captain Denzel Washington, Frank, the ambushing fleet has been dealt with. No survivors, as per your orders. Segmentum Solar is reporting that their forces are effectively crushing the rebellion across its subsectors. And, you'll want to hear this. The Palace of the Navigators is currently under siege by the Custodian Guard. Franklin stood, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the command deck. His voice carried an edge of satisfaction. The Custodians themselves? It seems the endgame for the novice nobilite is unfolding even faster than I anticipated. Excellent work, Denzel. Make sure our forces are on standby for further orders. Belisarius Call loomed forward with his towering, multi-limbed form, accompanied by an army of Skitarii and Castellar robots as they advanced on the Palace of the Navigators. The Mechanicum forces moved with cold precision, the rhythmic clanking of servos and the hum of arcane machinery filling the air. While the Custodian Guard breached the main entrance with their characteristic directness, Call opted for a different approach. He directed his forces to blast through the reinforced walls, targeting weak points identified by his omniscient auguries. To Call, efficiency outweighed theatrics. This assault was not only strategic but opportunistic. The Navigators, with a lineage as ancient as the Mechanicum itself, undoubtedly hoarded priceless standard template constructs, SDCs, and technological relics within their stronghold. With the emergence of the independence sector and its advancements in technology and governance, Call had negotiated the Libertas Mars Treaty with Franklin Valorian. The treaty divided production responsibilities. Mars would handle mass production while Nova Libertas focused on crafting high-quality, bespoke equipment. This arrangement created a competitive but cooperative dynamic, ensuring the imperium of man's survival while cementing both factions as essential pillars of progress. Call's eyes glimmered with the glow of his internal cogitators as he pondered the implications. The treaty not only made Mars and Nova Libertas indispensable but also fostered innovation through competition. However, for competition to flourish, more SDCs and ancient technologies were needed. The Navigators' cache would be invaluable. The Skitarii legions advanced in disciplined waves, clearing resistance with calculated efficiency. As they moved deeper into the palace, the Mechanicum encountered increasingly desperate defenders. The Navigators themselves were not psychers, but their auxilia troops were well-trained and fiercely loyal. Despite this, they were no match for the Skitarii Mandragora, Call's elite bodyguards, who dispatched them with surgical precision. Their galvanic rifles and transonic blades tore through the defenders, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Call's stride was unhurried, his augmented limbs carrying him forward with mechanical precision. Reports from the vanguard Skitarii indicated a heavy deadlock ahead, where auxilia forces had fortified their position. Without hesitation, Call ordered the Castellar robots to break through. The lumbering constructs, programmed for relentless destruction, surged forward. Their fists pummeled through barricades, and their incending combustors spewed flames that reduced the defenders to ash. Explosions rocked the palace as the Castellars breached the defensive line, clearing the path for Call and his retinue. As he entered the grand complex at the heart of the palace, Call's optics scanned the vast chamber. Ornate architecture surrounded him, with frescoes and tapestries depicting the Navigator's storied history. At the center of the room stood the Paternova, resplendent in his ceremonial robes. Despite his regal bearing, the Paternova's expression was twisted with rage and desperation. Fabricator General Belisarius Call, the Paternova snarled, his voice echoing through the chamber. You dare violate the sanctity of the Navigator houses? This is betrayal of the highest order. Call's voice, cold and metallic, echoed back. Betrayal, Paternova? That implies a bond of trust, which I assure you never existed. Your reliance on archaic practices and monopolistic control over warp travel has made you an obstacle to progress. You cling to a crumbling foundation, blind to the inevitable march of change. The Paternova's face darkened with fury. Your arrogance knows no bounds, Mechanicum dog. Do you not see that the Emperor's tyranny will eventually turn on you? Your religious dogma will be next on the chopping block. The Emperor will purge all parasites, and your kind will burn with the rest of us. Call tilted his head, his voice laced with mockery. You misunderstand the Mechanicum's evolution. While some cling to the title of Omnissiah for the Emperor, it is merely a designation, a cultural relic. Mars has adapted and will continue to do so, unlike your stagnant houses. Your inefficiency and resistance to change have sealed your fate. The Paternova's hand trembled as he pointed at Call. This is not evolution, it is treachery. You will doom us all with your hubris. Before the Paternova could continue, a golden blur streaked into the chamber. Captain General Constantin Valder, resplendent in his Oromite armor, strode forward with the unstoppable force of the Custodian Guard. His blade glinted in the dim light as he closed the distance to the Paternova. Without a word, Valder seized the man by the arm and began dragging him out of the chamber. This one is coming with us, Valder stated curtly, his tone brooking no argument. The Emperor has plans for him. Call barely spared a glance at the spectacle. His focus was on the massive, reinforced gate at the far end of the chamber. It bore the sigils of the navigators and radiated an aura of secrecy. Call's logic engines hummed as he calculated the odds. This was likely the repository of the navigators' most valuable relics, including, perhaps, SDCs. The Fabricator General extended a cluster of mechadendrites toward the gate, his augmented fingers beginning to work on its intricate locking mechanisms. While you enjoy your political theater, Captain General, Call said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, I shall see what treasures the navigators have been hoarding. Competition drives progress, and for Mars to compete with Nova Libertas, we shall need every advantage. Valder didn't reply, his focus remaining on the struggling Paternova. The Custodian Guard exited the chamber, leaving Call and his retinue to their task. As Call worked, the palace continued to shake with the sounds of battle. Skitarii forces clashed with remaining auxilia troops, and explosions echoed through the halls. Despite the chaos, Call was unperturbed. His logic engines calculated every variable, and his faith in the efficiency of his forces was absolute. Finally, the gate's locking mechanisms yielded with a resounding clang. The massive doors creaked open, revealing a chamber filled with ancient relics. STC fragments, technological schematics, and artifacts of unimaginable value were arrayed before him. Call's optics flared with excitement as he stepped inside, his mechadendrites reaching out to catalog and analyze the treasures. Ah, the navigators have indeed been hoarding quite the haul, Call mused aloud. This will do nicely. As he began the process of securing the relics, Call couldn't help but reflect on the significance of this moment. The Mechanicum of Mars and the Independence sector were not merely allies, they were competitors in the truest sense, driving each other to greater heights. With these discoveries, Mars would solidify its position as an unshakable pillar of the Imperium, ensuring that no force, not even the Emperor's wrath, could threaten its survival. The Fabricator General's mechadendrites worked tirelessly, dismantling the navigators' legacy piece by piece. Outside, the battle raged on, but within the chamber, the future of Mars and the Imperium was being rewritten, one relic at a time. The air within the Bridge of the Vengeful Spirit was tense as the news of the Novus Nobilite purge reached Horus Lupercal. The Primarch of the Luna Wolves stood at the command dais, his imposing figure silhouetted against the void beyond. His wolfish features were set in a contemplative grimace, his piercing gaze fixed on the hololithic display of Terra. Around him stood the Maurnival Abaddon, Tarek Torgadon, little Horus Aximand, and Haster Sejanus along with his ever-watchful equerry, Malagurst. A bold move by our brother, Horus muttered, his voice a low rumble. To eradicate the navigator houses so completely, and yet, it seems, decisive. Malagurst stepped forward, his pale face marred with the scars of his station. His sharp eyes gleamed with the glint of hidden knowledge. My lord, this purge did not begin with Franklin's retaliation. This has been decades in the making. The Emperor himself, in his ineffable wisdom, has likely orchestrated this moment, ensuring that when the navigators overstepped, there would be no recourse but annihilation. The Maurnival exchanged glances, their expressions varying from curiosity to unease. Abaddon, ever the staunch warrior, was the first to break the silence. If the navigators dared to target a Primarch, then they are nothing less than traitors. Their monopoly over warp travel has made them arrogant, blind to their fragility. I say we support the purge. Franklin's actions send a clear message, a message that no one is beyond the Emperor's justice. Torgadon chuckled, his humor a bomb against the tension. A bit extreme, wouldn't you say? Though I can't deny the irony. For all their vaunted power, they now find themselves at the mercy of the very tools they sought to control. Extreme, but effective, little Horus interjected, his tone measured. The Emperor has always valued efficiency. If Franklin's actions are part of a larger plan, then we would do well to align ourselves with it. Haster Sejanus, his face calm and reflective, stroked his chin thoughtfully. Yet, we cannot act in ignorance. Franklin's purge has far-reaching consequences. Warp travel, trade, even the cohesion of the crusade all hang in the balance. We need clarity, my lord. What does the Emperor intend as a replacement for the navigator houses? Malagurst's voice cut through the discussion, sharp and insistent. The navigators have always been a liability. Their mutations, their secretive ways, their hunger for power, all of it undermines the Imperium's unity. The Emperor's vision has no place for such weaknesses. It is only logical that he has foreseen this and prepared an alternative. Horus nodded slowly, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. He could see the merit in Malagurst's argument, yet the practicalities gnawed at him. The navigators were a necessary evil, their gene-linked abilities the cornerstone of warp navigation. Without them, the Crusade's momentum would falter. But to let such treachery go unpunished? Unthinkable. Enough, Horus said, his voice firm. The Maornival fell silent, their attention snapping back to their lord. To attempt the assassination of a Primarch is the highest treason. Franklin's actions, though severe, are justified. The navigator houses have proven themselves unworthy of their station. He turned to face the Hololith, the image of Terra looming large. We will change course. The vengeful spirit will make for Terra. Once there, we will take our navigators into custody and deliver them to the Emperor. If this is indeed part of his plan, then he will have the solution we seek. The Maornival exchanged glances once more. Abaddon's expression was one of grim satisfaction, while Torgadon's bore a flicker of amusement. Little Horus's brow furrowed in thought, and Sejanus's calm remained unshaken. A prudent course, my lord, Malagurst said, inclining his head. The Emperor's wisdom will guide us through this upheaval. And what of Franklin? Torgadon asked, his tone light but curious. Do we offer him our support directly, or simply observe from afar? Horus's smirk was cold, calculating. Franklin needs no aid from us. He is more than capable of handling this on his own. But our presence on Terra will send a message to all who watch. The Luna Wolf stands with his brothers. Let the Imperium know that treachery will not be tolerated, no matter its source. The Maornival straightened, their lord's resolve inspiring their own. Abaddon's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Then let us make for Terra. The navigators will answer for their crimes. Torgadon grinned, his usual levity returning. I do hope the Emperor has something spectacular planned. I'd hate for all this drama to end in disappointment. Little Horus shot him a look, though a faint smile tugged at his lips. Always the comedian, Tarek. Haster Sejanus's voice was calm, steady. Whatever lies ahead, we will face it as we always have together. Horus turned to his equerry, his expression inscrutable. Malagurst, prepare the fleet for the change in course. Inform the navigators that they are to be confined to quarters the moment we arrive in Segmentum Solar, until further notice. Any resistance will be met with force. Malagurst inclined his head. It will be done, my lord. Chapter 165, A Question about the Future. The vast courtroom of the Imperial Palace was a marvel of architectural grandeur and austere majesty, its vaulted ceilings stretching high into the heavens. The chamber was illuminated by a golden light that emanated from massive chandeliers, casting a warm glow over the assembled representatives of the Imperium. Nobles, governors, and emissaries from every corner of the galaxy stood or sat in somber expectation, their expressions a mixture of trepidation and curiosity. At the far end of the courtroom, seated upon an ornate dais, the Emperor of Mankind radiated authority and gravitas. His golden armor shimmered like a sun, his impassive gaze surveying the room with piercing intensity. To the emperor's right stood Malkador the Sigil Light, his aged yet indomitable figure draped in robes of midnight blue. His voice, amplified by unseen mechanisms, cut through the hushed murmurs of the crowd. This court is now in session. We are gathered to judge the crimes of the novice nobilite, represented by the Paternova, Relas Belisarius, and the noble houses sworn to him. The accused, Relas Belisarius, stood bound in chains of gleaming adamantium at the center of the courtroom. He was an imposing figure despite his captivity, his once regal robes tattered but his pride unbroken. Around him, representatives of the most influential navigator houses stood in grim silence, their faces pale but resolute. Flanking the courtroom were the Primarches, their monumental presence adding to the atmosphere of finality. Each was a titan of legend: Dorn, Gil-Iman, Sanguinius, Horus, Lemon Russ, Angren, Fukin, Ferrus Manus, Fulgrim, the Lion, and Franklin Valorian, whose smirk betrayed a simmering satisfaction at the proceedings. Malkador continued. The charges are as follows: conspiracy to assassinate a Primarch of the Imperium, the attempted subversion of the Emperor's divine plan, gross dereliction of duty in safeguarding the Imperium's interests, and numerous counts of exploitation and abuse that have caused untold suffering to humanity. Evidence will now be presented. A hololithic projector activated, casting towering images into the air above the courtroom. The crimes of the novice nobilite were laid bare for all to see. Holovids displayed secret conclaves where assassination plots were hatched. Other recordings revealed the systemic exploitation of imperial citizens by the navigator houses, extortionate demands for passage, the forced servitude of voidfarers, and the deliberate hoarding of resources during times of crisis. Franklin's voice could be heard from one recording, recounting the assassination attempt he had survived, his tone laced with contempt. As the evidence mounted, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Malkador's voice rose once more. The evidence is undeniable. We now turn to the accused. Paternova Relas Belisarius, you stand at the heart of these atrocities. What say you in your defense? Relas Belisarius raised his head, his voice resonating with defiance. I am guilty of nothing but safeguarding humanity's future. The navigators have guided humanity through the stars since the dark age of technology. Without us, the Imperium would collapse. These accusations are born of fear and envy, not truth. The Primarch Franklin Valorian seeks to replace us with soulless machines, to cast aside millennia of tradition. Is this the Emperor's will? The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, some in agreement, others in outrage. The Emperor raised a single hand, and silence fell instantly. Tradition, the Emperor began, his voice deep and commanding, is not an excuse for tyranny. The navigators have served their purpose, but their arrogance has blinded them to the greater vision of humanity's destiny. You speak of safeguarding the Imperium, yet your actions have endangered it. To attempt the assassination of a Primarch is treason of the highest order. There is no defense for such a crime. Relas Belisarius's composure faltered, but he pressed on. Without us, the Imperium will fall into darkness. The Emperor cannot replace us. He needs us. The Emperor's eyes burned with golden light. You overestimate your importance. Humanity will no longer be shackled by mutation and monopoly. The novice nobilite's time has passed. Your crimes have sealed your fate. He turned to the jury of Primarches. My lords, I beg you to reconsider. The Emperor's plan will doom us all. The warp is chaos, only we can navigate its storms. Sanguinius's voice, gentle yet firm, cut through the air. Your fear does not excuse your actions. Humanity's future lies beyond the warp. If we are to survive, we must evolve. You have proven yourself unworthy of your station. Gil-Iman nodded in agreement. The novice nobilite has become a liability. Their corruption is evident, and their monopoly stifles progress. It is time to end this chapter of humanity's history. Angren growled, his voice filled with barely restrained fury. You tried to kill my brother. There is no excuse for that. Your time is over. The Emperor rose from his throne, his towering figure casting a long shadow over the accused. The chamber fell silent, every eye fixed on him. Relas Belisarius, Paternova of the novice nobilite, your name shall be stricken from the annals of history. Your legacy will be one of betrayal and failure. The navigator houses are hereby disbanded. Their assets will be seized, their genetic lines eradicated, and their influence purged from the Imperium. Let this be a warning to all who would defy the will of the Imperium. The era of mutation and monopoly is over. The era of progress and unity begins now. The Emperor's voice rang with finality, a death knell for the novice nobilite. As his words echoed through the chamber, the crowd erupted in a mixture of applause and stunned silence. Guards moved to seize Relas Belisarius and the other representatives of the navigator houses. Some went willingly, their faces blank with shock, others struggled, their cries of outrage drowned out by the crowd. Franklin Valorian stepped back to his place among the Primarches, his smirk replaced by a look of grim satisfaction. Malkador concluded the trial. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that the Emperor's justice is absolute. The sins of the novice nobilite have been judged, and their sentence shall serve as a reminder to all. Court is adjourned. As the assembly began to disperse, the representatives carried the weight of what they had witnessed back to their worlds. The Judgment of Gold would be remembered as a turning point in the history of the Imperium, a moment when the old order was swept away to make way for the new. 849.30 m. The newly retrofitted Bridge of the Vengeful Spirit was a testament to the mechanical and aesthetic synergy between the Independence sector and the Mechanicum of Mars. Polished adamantium bulkheads shimmered with the faint glow of lumen strips, casting sharp reflections on the pristine surfaces. The scent of machine oil mingled with the faint tang of ozone as servitors adjusted to their stations, while Mechanicum adepts whispered binary litanies into cogitator consoles. Primarch Franklin Valorian walked beside his brother, Horus Lupercal, the towering figures a stark contrast to the mortals who paused and saluted as they passed. Franklin's signature smirk played on his lips, his calm and confident demeanor unshaken despite the vast undertaking that the two sectors had embarked upon, the total replacement of the navigator houses with the newly developed void abacus and prognosticator systems. The Judgment of Gold was now months behind them, but its effects rippled across the Imperium. Horus glanced at Franklin as they entered the heart of the bridge. The massive observation dome at the fore of the room had been replaced with reinforced plating to better accommodate the ship's new navigation systems. At its center stood a newly installed hololithic projector, its mechanisms purring faintly with life. Horus tilted his head, his piercing gaze narrowing slightly in curiosity. "So, brother," Horus began, his voice rich and commanding, "is there something special about the Vengeful Spirit's dual navigation tools, or am I to assume your cryptic silence is simply to keep me in suspense?" Franklin's smirk widened. "For you, dear brother, nothing but the best. But before we dive into the specifics, let me show you something." Franklin stepped to the console and pressed a rune with deliberate precision. The hololithic projector hummed louder, and within moments, a sprawling, three-dimensional map materialized before them. Swirling ribbons of light, shimmering in hues of violet, blue, and gold, spread across the projection. The luminous patterns seemed to pulse with an almost living rhythm, their chaotic beauty mesmerizing. Horus's eyes widened. "This is the warp." Franklin nodded. "Or at least, a theoretical map of it, based on the data gathered by the prognosticator and processed by the void abacus." Horus stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the projection. The intricate dance of lights revealed currents, eddies, and vast storms of energy, a chaotic, unending ocean. He extended a hand as if to touch it, but the hollow image rippled and reformed, keeping its distance. "I've seen the results of warp travel countless times," Horus admitted, his voice tinged with awe. "But to see it like this, how does one not go mad, simply looking at it? That is why we block every viewing port during warp travel. Even our machines and their spirits are said to falter under its gaze. How have you avoided this?" Franklin's expression grew serious, the playful edge to his demeanor falling away. "What drives mortals and even machines to madness isn't the warp itself, Horus, but the sheer overload of information it represents. The human mind, and even some machine intelligences, aren't equipped to process the infinite layers of reality that the warp embodies. When that chaos interacts with the human soul or mind, it overwhelms them." Horus folded his arms, nodding thoughtfully. "And these machines of yours, the prognosticator and the void abacus? How do they circumvent this fragility?" Franklin gestured toward the projection. "The prognosticator analyzes the immediate area of the warp within a few light-years around the ship. It collects data, breaking the chaos into manageable fragments. The void abacus then takes this data and renders it into a navigable map, like the one you see here. Neither device directly interacts with the warp in the way an unshielded mind or soul would. Instead, it views the warp from a metaphorical safe distance, as if behind an unbreakable pane of glass." Horus's brow furrowed. "And the machines themselves? Do they not attract attention? I know you would dismiss my question as superstition, but it is said the warp is home to entities that hunger for such things." Franklin chuckled softly. That, dear brother, is the beauty of it. These machines have no souls, no psychic signatures for these entities to latch onto. They are entirely mechanical, processing information without drawing undue attention. It's akin to observing a predator from behind a reinforced barrier. You see them, but they cannot see you. Horus tilted his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. You make it sound so simple. Yet, the warp has confounded humanity for millennia. Tell me, though, if these tools are so effective, why was it not done sooner? Franklin's smirk returned. Necessity breeds innovation. The navigator house's monopoly stifled the development of alternatives. They had a vested interest in ensuring no one could circumvent their role. It wasn't until their treachery that we were given the mandate to fully explore these possibilities. Horus's gaze turned back to the map, his eyes narrowing. Even so, the warp remains a dangerous place. What of the so-called entities? The imperial truth would have us believe these are not gods or demons, but rather, what? Unidentified xenos. Franklin nodded. Precisely. The warp is a realm alien to our understanding, but that doesn't make it supernatural. The things that dwell there are likely a form of life that evolved within that environment. Dangerous, yes. Mysterious, certainly. But they are not divine, nor are they invincible. The prognosticator and void abacus help us chart safe paths through this storm without drawing unnecessary attention. Horus's voice grew quieter, more contemplative. And yet, even with all your precautions, there are still risks. We've both seen ships lost to the warp, their crews never to return. How do you account for that? Franklin stepped closer to the map, his finger tracing one of the calmer channels of light. The warp is ever-changing. No map will ever be perfect. But with these tools, we can minimize the uncertainty. Combined with the teachings of the imperial truth, we can demystify the warp, stripping away the fear and superstition that paralyzes so many. Knowledge is our greatest weapon, Horus. Horus studied his brother, his expression unreadable. Finally, he let out a low chuckle. You speak with such certainty, Franklin. It's almost infectious. Perhaps there is merit to these tools of yours after all. Tell me, how does the rest of the Imperium fare with the transition? Are the other legions adjusting as smoothly as you and I? Franklin's smirk turned into a knowing grin. Some adapt more quickly than others. Robot, of course, has already incorporated the systems into his fleets with precision. Dorn, as ever, is cautious but thorough. The Lion remains reserved, though his ships have begun the refits. Horus let out a hearty laugh. I can imagine. And you, Franklin? Are you satisfied with what you've achieved? Franklin's gaze lingered on the map, the swirling patterns reflected in his eyes. Satisfied? No, not yet. But I'm hopeful. The warp is no longer the great unknowable abyss it once was. With every ship we retrofit, with every fleet we equip with these tools, we take another step toward securing humanity's future. And that, dear brother, is a goal worth striving for. Horus placed a hand on Franklin's shoulder, a rare moment of camaraderie between the two. Then let us strive together, Franklin. For the Imperium. For humanity. Franklin nodded, his smirk softening into a genuine smile. For humanity. Horus stood near the central console, gazing at the holographic display Franklin had shown him earlier. He remained silent, digesting the intricate information about the tools and their workings. Beside him, Franklin, smirking as though he held all the answers, produced 2 cigars from a case engraved with the sigil of Nova Libertas. Here, brother, Franklin said, handing one to Horus. Horus accepted it with a slight smile. You always have a way of bringing a personal touch to the most significant moments. Franklin chuckled and lit Horus' cigar before lighting his own. A brief silence stretched between them as the 2 Primarches took their first draws, the faint glow of the cigars adding a warm light to their surroundings. Franklin leaned casually against the console, exhaling smoke and watching it swirl upward like fleeting wisps of thought. Finally, he broke the silence. Horus, have you given thought to what comes after the crusade? The question caught Horus slightly off guard, his brown eyes narrowing as he considered the query. He began to speak, but Franklin raised a hand, his smirk turning into a more reflective expression. Wait, Franklin said, let me rephrase. What would you do when we are replaced by common humans? Horus froze mid-motion, the cigar halfway to his lips. Franklin's words hung heavy in the air. Replaced. Horus echoed, his tone skeptical. Franklin's gaze didn't waver. Yes, replaced. You've seen the signs, haven't you? Father's plans, Malkador's actions, the gradual establishment of the Council of Terra. The infrastructure I've been tasked to build, the framework of an imperium that functions without us. Horus froze for a moment, the cigar resting between his fingers. His eyes, sharp and calculating, narrowed as he turned to look at his brother. Franklin's tone was serious now, his usual air of playful confidence giving way to something heavier. I'm sure you've noticed it, brother, Franklin continued, his gaze locked on the vast void of stars visible through the reinforced viewports. Father and Malkador's plan, it's there if you just look at the bigger picture. They're having me build the infrastructure of the future, not just for us, but for the mortals. The Council of Terra, the nobility, it's all part of their vision. Horus's jaw tightened, and he leaned against the console, his massive frame casting a long shadow. And you think this vision involves us being replaced? Cast aside after all we've done, after everything we've built? Franklin nodded, his voice calm but insistent. Yes. Father will transition power to mortals. He's preparing them to govern, to lead. And we, as the absolute peak of humanity, will fade into the background. He paused, taking another drag from his cigar. I know you don't like me much, Horus. We don't see eye to eye on many things. But I respect your vision, and I trust your judgment enough to ask for your opinion on this. Horus stared at his brother, his expression unreadable. The flickering light from the hollow chart reflected in his piercing eyes. After a moment, he spoke, his voice measured. Why you, Franklin? Why are you privy to this plan when I am not? I've been Father's closest confidant. He's given me assignments, spoken to me directly. Before he could finish, Franklin smirked and reached into his tunic, pulling out a data slate. He held it out to Horus, who hesitated before taking it. If you're wondering why I know, Franklin said, his tone light yet pointed, look at this. It's connected to the galactic network. The general framework of Father's plan is all there, for those who know where to look. Horus took the data slate, his eyes scanning the contents. The quiet intensity in his gaze deepened as he absorbed the information. The Council of Terra. The gradual sidelining of the Astartes legions. The transition of power to mortal governance. It was all there, stark and undeniable. The Primarch of the Luna Wolves fell silent, the weight of the revelations pressing down on him. Franklin watched him closely, his expression unreadable. I know this is a lot to take in, Franklin said after a moment, his voice softer now. We were created as conquerors, Horus. Generals. That much is clear. But we were never meant to rule forever. So think about it. What's your retirement plan? I, for one, will be with my sons, enjoying a barbecue. Or perhaps pushing the borders of the independence sector further, who knows? Horus didn't respond immediately. He set the data slate down, his mind racing. Franklin's words echoed in his thoughts, intertwining with the cold facts presented on the slate. The idea of being replaced, of the Astartes becoming relics of a bygone era, was a bitter pill to swallow. Franklin's voice broke through his reverie. Talk to Robert. He's preparing his sons for statesmanship. They're learning how to govern, how to lead in a world where we're no longer at the forefront. It's worth considering. Horus finally looked up, his gaze meeting Franklin's. And you? You seem so certain of Father's plans. How can you be so accepting of this? Franklin smiled faintly, his eyes softening. Because I understand Father, at least in this regard. He's not an emotional man, that's true. But he cares for us. He wants us to have a place in the future, even if it's not the one we expected. He gestured vaguely toward the viewport, his cigar smoldering in his hand. Take a walk through the gardens of the Imperial Palace sometime. You'll find 20 suites there, one for each of us. Father has already planned his retirement, and he wants us to accompany him. That, to me, says everything. Horus exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. You think Father cares for us? Truly. I do, Franklin said simply. He may not show it through emotion, but his actions speak louder. And that's enough for me. The two brothers stood in silence for a while, the soft hum of the vengeful spirit the only sound between them. Though their relationship was marked by tension and differences, in that moment, there was a sense of mutual understanding. Franklin respected Horus's vision and leadership, and Horus, despite his reservations, couldn't deny the weight of Franklin's words. Finally, Franklin broke the silence, his smirk returning. "Think it over, brother. When you're ready, we'll talk more. For now, enjoy the cigar. It's one of the finer pleasures of mortal life, after all." Horus chuckled despite himself, shaking his head. "You always know how to end a conversation, Franklin." The Primarch of the Independence sector grinned, his confidence unshaken. "It's a gift." Chapter 166, Siege or Fortify. Mount Telefuz loomed high over the Olympian landscape, its jagged peaks clawing at the skies like ancient guardians. The crisp air carried the faint hum of machinery from distant forges and the murmur of life thriving within this fortress world. Franklin Valorian stood beside the Emperor, surveying the rugged terrain. "Olympia certainly has no shortage of stone and mountains," Franklin observed, his deep voice carrying a touch of wry humor. "Flatlands seem to be an endangered species here. Makes me wonder, where are they growing their crops? Underground farms with artificial sunlight, perhaps? Oh. Wait, it could be terraced fields. I've seen quite a few possible locations around us." The Emperor, clad in radiant golden armor that seemed to pulse with the light of a distant star, turned his gaze toward his son. His expression, though often inscrutable, softened with a hint of amusement. "Your curiosity is never-ending, Franklin." "Keeps life interesting," Franklin replied, kicking a loose rock off the precipice. He watched it tumble down the sheer cliff, disappearing into the abyss below. "But seriously, why are we here? Couldn't we just meet Purdy in Lacos or wherever he's holding court?" The Emperor's golden eyes flickered with a knowing light. "Spectacle," he said simply. Franklin raised an eyebrow, a lopsided grin forming on his face. "No shit," he muttered. His foot nudged another rock, sending it careening downward. Before he could voice another quip, a booming voice echoed across the mountain range, amplified by the natural acoustics of the Olympian peaks. "Father!" The sound reverberated like the strike of a great bell, sending a flock of avian creatures scattering from the cliffs. Franklin straightened, his smirk fading into an expression of curiosity. "I'm guessing that's Purdy," he said, tilting his head toward the distant sound. The Emperor nodded, a faint smile gracing his otherwise stoic visage. "Indeed." Once more, Perturabo climbed. His life up to the point faded into inconsequentiality. His works of art and science, his time at Locos, his conquests of most of Olympia, they all seemed unimportant. They were activities undertaken to while away a long vigil, until this sole matter of importance could be addressed. Finally, after years of waiting, his father had come. Perturabo climbed hand over hand, rapidly and without due care, ripping his skin on the razored rocks of Mount Telefuz. Its pristine snows, untouched by human tread, gleamed above. But they could not outshine the figure that stood at the top of the cliff. Perturabo stared into his brilliance, weeping for the glory. His tears froze upon his skin, coating them in ice that cracked when his cheeks moved. "Father," he cried. The glowing figure said nothing, but awaited him silently below the peak of the mountain. Though his view should often have been obscured by the overhanging crags of the unclimbable peak, Perturabo could see his father no matter where he was. He did not care how, he could see his father. He was certain that it was him. More certain than he had ever been of anything in his life. From the moment the lights came down from sky 2 nights ago and settled upon Telefuz, he was sure that his true maker had arrived. Others said the black judges had come for their tithe, or that the gods had returned to judge the world, but Perturabo knew with unshakable certainty who it was. Father. He had left the palace at Locos the same day without provisions and taken an aircraft for Telefuz. There was nowhere for the light flitter to land, so he had crashed it down at the base of the towering mountain and set out on foot. Through terraced fields, then sparse forests, onto the prickly meadow that grew beyond the treeline and finally onto bare rock. Almost 8,000 meters and he had not stopped. He looked upwards. The star maelstrom was gone. For the first time, Perturabo was free of its scrutiny. He was not at peace, not yet. His heart thundered with nervous energy. His mind crowded itself with 100 different possible outcomes of this meeting. Anxiety turned most of them bad. He feared he would not be recognized, or that he would be deemed unworthy, or that he would find his father cruel. Or that he had been wrong, and it was not his father after all. Positive possibilities dwindled under the weight of his paranoia, inherent to him but honed by years of life among the Olympians. He had lost count of how many plots he had foiled against his life. There was a chance this miracle was but the latest. His need to know sped him on. Infused with a frantic, almost destructive energy, he climbed at a speed that would have burst a mortal heart, passing far into air that would have starved the lungs of a normal human being. Telefuz was so high that altitude sickness and a lack of oxygen afflicted even him, and he ascended in a state close to delirium, taunted by the mocking words of unseen beings. He reached a broad ledge. Behind him, all of Olympia spread out, the lesser mountains like sycophants crowded around the majesty of Mount Telefuz. Sparing no look for the view, he ran across the loose rock of the ledge, imprinting it for the first time with human footprints. A cliff of ice reared up ahead. Without stopping, he scrambled upwards, his clawed hands punching holes into the rock face when no handhold existed. The cold burned his flesh, his fingers became numb. Like tools of raw iron isolated from his body, he used them to haul himself upwards. His breath seared his lungs, his limbs trembled with lactic acid buildup, even his marvelous body could not purge. Colored dots danced across his eyes. He reached upwards, throwing his weight after his hand by pushing hard with his feet. He had been climbing too fast and too dangerously. Also he might fulfill his need to see his father. This time, his fingers found nothing to grab onto, and he overbalanced. With an incoherent shout, Perturabo fell backwards, finally defeated. But he did not fall. An armored hand grabbed his wrist, and though it was a hand of standard human size, not gargantuan like his own, a great strength was hidden within it. Perturabo looked up, straight into the face of the shining figure, and he cried out in fear and wonder. His mind was laid bare. A presence as crushing as the collapse of a mountain bore down on him. The light faded. Perturabo was standing upon solid ice over 9,000 meters in the sky, where the air thinned to blackness and stars shone all day long. The man's face, previously hidden by the light of his majesty, cleared. Features emerged from the radiance, until Perturabo saw his body and face clearly. A man, mighty and godlike in power, but a man for all that, stood before him. His smile was broad in a flawless face. "My son," he said. His lips remained in that sincere expression of pleasure, the like of which Perturabo had never seen on the calculating faces of the Olympians. No words passed his lips, but still he spoke. "I have found you." Perturabo swayed. The pressure of his father's mind was immense. The much-feared star maelstrom was nothing compared to this power. Perturabo's deepest thoughts were dragged out into the light of his soul and read as easily as words on paper. He looked down on the man, then fell to his knees with all humility, a quality which until this moment he had not known in himself. "Father." Kneeling, Perturabo was still taller than the man, but he was left in no doubt that this strange visitor surpassed him in every way. "I am the Emperor of Terra, and of all mankind," said the man now speaking aloud. His voice was calm and full of the promise of great things. "You are Perturabo." I am, said Perturabo, "you know me." The Emperor laid a hand on his shoulder. Warriors in tall helms and golden armor were arrayed behind the Emperor. They watched him closely. "You are as dauntless as I intended you to be." The Emperor looked out over the world, as if he could see the smallest detail from their lofty vantage. "You have achieved much." His smile broadened with delight. "I see a world of peace, filled with mighty castles and marvelous devices. We have much to talk of. And I can teach you a great deal. I sense the hunger in you for knowledge. I think you and I have many nights of discussion ahead of us." "Yes," said Perturabo, "please." He was struck near dumb by wonder. "Will you offer me your allegiance? Will you join with me, and pledge yourself to humanity's service?" The warriors in gold tensed, their weapons pointed at Perturabo. Ordinarily this insult would have sent him into a towering rage, but Perturabo's arrogance, until then immutable as iron, melted and was swept away, and he answered meekly. "I want nothing more. I swear that I shall serve you faithfully for all time. This I pledge." The Emperor looked at him with an expression of infinite wisdom. Deep in his eyes, sorrow lurked. Perturabo wished more than anything to banish that sadness if he could. "Then rise, my son." The sadness was hidden away again, so that Perturabo doubted he had ever seen it, and was ashamed he could impute such an emotion to so perfect a being. "Your road will be hard. But few are worthy of it," said the Emperor. "I have many tasks for you. The indefatigable. The indomitable. The unrelenting. You shall be my Lord of Iron." Perturabo cried out in unabashed joy. Finally, he felt acceptance without caveat. Love radiated from the emperor for his found son. Perturabo basked in it. For the first time, he felt a sense of true belonging. "And may it forever be so," said Perturabo. The first time Perturabo laid eyes upon Franklin Valorian was on his return to the city of Lacos. His mind swirled with thoughts of the monumental meeting with his father atop the peak of Telefuz. The emperor had been everything Perturabo had envisioned, a figure of immense power and inscrutable presence. Yet, the initial joy and awe of meeting his creator had begun to fade, leaving behind a brewing storm of questions and uncertainties. Among these was the emperor's enigmatic decision to assign a brother, one he had never known existed, to guide him through the intricacies of the Imperium's bureaucracy. As Perturabo approached the grand halls of Lacos, he caught sight of a stranger speaking animatedly with his sister, Call iPhone. The man stood out in every possible way. Clad in a navy blue mech suit adorned with star-like patterns, his presence radiated confidence and ease. The suit itself was a marvel of technological sophistication, far beyond anything Perturabo had seen on Olympia. Perturabo's analytical mind immediately began dissecting the design, noting the fluid integration of armor plates, energy conduits, and embedded devices whose purposes were not immediately apparent. But what struck him more was the man's demeanor. Unlike the cold, calculating aura Perturabo himself exuded, this brother wore a perpetual smirk, an expression that seemed both self-assured and utterly carefree. As Perturabo approached, he caught fragments of their conversation. "The way you analyze your father's governance is impressive," the stranger said, his voice warm yet calculated. "I've seen many rulers in my time, and you, Call iPhone, have the qualities of an excellent leader. If damn ecos weren't so rigid, he'd see it too." Call iPhone gave a rare, genuine smile. "You flatter me, stranger, but my father, well, he believes leadership is a man's burden." "Then he's blind to potential," the man replied smoothly. "Leadership isn't about gender, it's about talent and worth. If he can't see that, he's doing himself and Lacos a disservice." Call iPhone tilted her head, her expression a mix of curiosity and amusement. "And what of my brothers?" she asked, testing him. "Heracon." Franklin shrugged. "He'd be outmaneuvered by his political opponents within a month. Too trusting, not enough guile. Andos is the opposite, too kind for his own good. A ruler must find balance, and you, Call iPhone, have it. The strength to command and the wisdom to adapt." Perturabo's steps quickened as a surge of irritation sparked within him. This brother had evaluated his family so casually, so thoroughly, and seemed to have won Caliphone's approval with his silver tongue. Perturabo's analytical mind, ever restless, began forming questions. Why had the emperor entrusted this brother with such important tasks? And why did this man's flippant demeanor conceal an undeniable air of authority? Perturabo cleared his throat, drawing their attention. Caliphone's expression shifted to one of sibling formality, while the stranger turned with that same irrepressible smirk. "Ah, you must be Perty," the man said, stepping forward. "Franklin Valorian, Primarch of the 11th Legion. And, as of now, your brother, and apparently, your new guide to the labyrinth of imperial bureaucracy." Perturabo's golden eyes narrowed as he took in the man before him. "I prefer my full name," he said coldly. Franklin's smirk didn't waver. "Sure thing, Peter." The nickname hit like a miscalculated chisel strike, causing Perturabo's jaw to tighten. "It's Perturabo," he corrected, his tone sharper. Franklin raised his hands in mock surrender. "Got it, Peter Turbo. My bad." Call iPhone stifled a laugh, quickly excusing herself from the scene. Perturabo watched her leave, his irritation mounting. Turning back to Franklin, he decided to test this brother's temperament. "You carry yourself as though nothing in the world could trouble you," he said. "Do you truly take your responsibilities so lightly? Or is this an act?" Franklin leaned casually against a nearby pillar, unperturbed. "Oh, I take my responsibilities very seriously. I just don't see the point in brooding over them. Life's complicated enough without adding unnecessary weight to it." Perturabo's tone turned sarcastic. "A fascinating philosophy. I'm sure it serves you well when you are called to address matters of great importance." Franklin's smirk softened into something more thoughtful. "You're testing me. That's fine. I'd probably do the same if our roles were reversed. But let me save us both some time. I'm here because Father trusts me to handle things that matter. And I'm here to help you, whether you like it or not." Perturabo's eyes flicked to the mech suit once more, his mind shifting gears. Your suit. It's sophisticated. More so than anything I've encountered. Tell me, what's its purpose? Franklin straightened, clearly enjoying the shift in topic. Glad you asked. It's more than just armor. It's a masterpiece of functionality. 3 layers of shielding, quantum, void, and conversion. Dimensional storage for weapons and tools. Here, let me show you. With a swift motion, Franklin activated a control on his suit. A low hum filled the air as a massive rotary cannon materialized, attaching seamlessly to his right arm. The weapon's design was as elegant as it was intimidating, a fusion of form and function that left Perturabo momentarily speechless. Impressive, Perturabo admitted, his tone begrudging. But tell me, do you design such marvels yourself? Franklin shook his head. Not entirely. I'm more of an overseer. I gather the brightest minds, give them the resources they need, and let them work their magic. The independence sector provides the material support, and I provide the vision. Perturabo's skepticism lingered. So you rely on others? I rely on teamwork, Franklin corrected. No one achieves greatness alone, Perty. Not even us. Perturabo bristled at the nickname but found himself drawn into the conversation despite his reservations. The casual yet confident way Franklin spoke was disarming, and the mention of the independence sector piqued his curiosity. The independence sector, Perturabo said, his tone shifting to one of genuine interest. I've heard whispers of its preservation of technology from the Dark Age. Tell me more. Franklin handed Perturabo a sleek data slate. This contains everything you'll need to know about the current state of the Imperium, including the independence sector. But in short, it's a haven for innovation and progress. We've managed to preserve and advance technologies that were almost lost to time. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Perturabo accepted the data slate, his mind already racing with possibilities. For the first time since their meeting, his guarded demeanor began to crack, replaced by a spark of genuine curiosity. As the two continued to talk, their initial tension gave way to a shared appreciation for technology and progress. Though their personalities remained starkly different, a foundation was laid for what could become a unique and complex bond. By the end of their conversation, Perturabo found himself both irritated and intrigued by this enigmatic brother. Franklin's perpetual smirk and carefree attitude still grated on his nerves, but beneath that exterior lay a mind as sharp as any he had encountered. As Perturabo turned to leave, data slate in hand, Franklin called after him. A few weeks later, Franklin invited Perturabo to a gathering of brothers in the Grand Chamber of Sweet Liberty. Franklin walked beside Perturabo, his casual confidence contrasting with Perturabo's measured steps. So, Peter, how are you holding up? Your legion? Franklin asked, breaking the silence as they approached the grand doors. Perturabo's expression tightened at the nickname. It's Perturabo, he said sternly, casting a side glance at Franklin. I've told you to use my full name. Franklin smirked, unfazed. Sure thing, Peter Turbo. Perturabo sighed heavily, his breath audible, and let out a low grunt. Deciding to move past the inevitable irritation, he added, my legion is exemplary. They have proven their mettle time and time again, achieving feats no other could match. Their history speaks for itself. That's good, Franklin replied, his tone genuine despite the grin that still lingered on his face. Exemplary legions make for exemplary brothers. As the two entered the chamber, Perturabo was immediately struck by the strong, distinctive aroma of cigars wafting through the air. It was a smell that he associated with luxury and leisure, not exactly the atmosphere he had anticipated. His golden eyes swept the room, taking in the sight of his assembled brothers. Conversations ceased as the gathered Primarches turned their attention to the newcomers. Their gazes ranged from curious to calculating, each brother assessing the rediscovered sibling and the ever-charismatic Franklin. Magnus, seated at the far end with his towering crimson presence unmistakable, was the first to speak. His deep voice carried a mix of amusement and curiosity. How is it that Franklin is always the one able to find new brothers? He asked, his single remaining eye glinting with a knowing look. Dorn, standing stoically near a large holographic display, glanced briefly at Magnus before answering in his typical blunt manner. Because he's Franklin. He is father's unofficial liaison. This makes sense. Dorn's tone was matter-of-fact, as if this explanation required no elaboration. Franklin chuckled, giving Dorn a nod of acknowledgement. Unofficial or not, I do what needs to be done. Before Perturabo could process the subtle banter, Sanguinius approached him with a radiant smile, his angelic features exuding warmth and charisma. I am Sanguinius, he said, extending a hand. Welcome, brother. It is an honor to finally meet you. Perturabo shook Sanguinius's hand with a firm grip, noting the sincerity in his words. Thank you, Perturabo replied curtly, though he appreciated the gesture. Rabut Guilliman was next, stepping forward with a composed demeanor. Rabut Guilliman, he introduced himself. It's good to have you among us, Perturabo. Your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Perturabo replied, his tone neutral but respectful. Guilliman's reputation as a master planner and statesman had certainly reached his ears. Magnus rose from his seat and approached, towering over the others. Magnus the Red, he said with a small smile, extending his massive hand. I hope you've found your time since rediscovery enlightening, brother. It has been, revealing, Perturabo replied carefully, shaking Magnus' hand. He was struck by the sheer presence of his crimson-haired sibling, whose piercing gaze seemed to see far beyond the present moment. Finally, Dorn stepped forward, his movements precise and deliberate. Rogel Dorn, he said simply, his tone clipped but not unkind. You will find that each of us has our place within the Imperium. I trust you will come to understand yours. Perturabo inclined his head slightly. I always do. Magnus' smile widened, and his tone took on a slightly mischievous edge. Most of our brothers are still out conquering the stars, but you may know their names and faces from the latest family portrait we took. Perhaps father has already shown it to you. Perturabo raised an eyebrow. A family portrait. Magnus nodded, clearly enjoying the moment. Indeed. A picked capture for propaganda purposes. Franklin insists it shows the unity and strength of the Primarches. Since a rediscovered sibling has joined us, I imagine a new pict will soon be organized. Isn't that right, Franklin? Franklin leaned against a nearby column, arms crossed and his ever-present smirk in place. Oh, absolutely. Can't miss an opportunity to immortalize the family dynamic. Perturabo frowned slightly, unsure how to interpret Magnus' tone. I assume this is meant to bolster morale among the Imperium's populace. Precisely, Magnus replied smoothly. A shining image of strength and camaraderie. Never mind that most of us are rarely in the same place at the same time. Dorn interjected, his tone dry. It serves its purpose. Appearances matter, even if reality does not always align. Magnus chuckled, the sound deep and resonant. And here I thought you disliked the theatrics, Dorn. I do, Dorn replied, his expression unchanging. But I understand their necessity. Franklin clapped Perturabo on the shoulder, drawing his attention back to the present. Don't worry, Perty. You'll get used to the family dynamic soon enough. Perturabo's golden eyes flicked toward Franklin, narrowing slightly at the nickname, but he chose not to comment this time. Rogel Dorn approached Franklin. Dorn walked with his characteristic posture, stoic, resolute and precise, his hands clasped behind his back. In his other hand, he carried a meticulously detailed architectural blueprint rolled tightly under his arm. The faint sound of murmured conversations and the distant hum of machinery filled the background, but Dorn's determined steps silenced all as he approached Franklin. Franklin stood near a broad table, casually inspecting a glowing schematic of the Independence sector. His perpetual smirk deepened as he sensed Dorn's approach, though he didn't look up immediately. Nearby, Perturabo hovered, idly observing the display, though his sharp gaze betrayed his interest. Dorn, with a slight bow of his head, addressed Franklin directly. Brother, I have completed the commissioned design for your fortress world. Its position and layout will protect not only the planetary surface but the entire solar system it governs. Allow me to present it. Franklin's smirk grew as he turned, his brown eyes gleaming with curiosity. Let's see what you've got, Dorn. I've been looking forward to seeing the master builder's work in action. Dorn unrolled the blueprint with practiced precision, spreading it out on the table. The design was immaculate, a series of concentric planetary defense rings, automated orbital platforms, overlapping void shields, and artillery placements that created a near-impenetrable fortress around the planet. Dorn's voice carried a tone of pride as he explained. The primary fortress sits at the planetary poles, ensuring protection against orbital assaults, Dorn began, his voice carrying the solemn weight of an immutable truth. Secondary and tertiary bastions cover every strategic weak point, allowing for overlapping fields of fire. The orbital defense stations operate in perfect unison with surface batteries, creating an inescapable web of destruction for any invader foolish enough to approach. Franklin leaned forward, smirk widening as he examined the design. Impressive, Rogel. Truly. A masterclass in meticulous overkill. But... He straightened, folding his arms in mock contemplation. No fortress is safe when Sweet Liberty is in the system. Dorn's expression didn't shift except for the slight narrowing of his eyes. A fortress cannot defend against orbital annihilation by a glorified parade ship. That is not the fault of the design but the unholy absurdity of your vessel. Franklin's grin broadened. Well said, Dorn. Sweet Liberty does have a certain way of equalizing things. You know, with giant lasers. Before Dorn could reply, Perturabo, who had been looming silently behind Franklin, finally spoke. He's right. Franklin turned, curious. Oh? What's your take, Perty? Perturabo stepped closer, his voice carrying its usual grim weight as his eyes scanned the blueprint. It's adequate. Precise. But boring. Predictable. Dorn's head snapped up like a turret locking onto a target. Predictable. Perturabo didn't even glance at him. Symmetry is a weakness. It creates patterns, and patterns are vulnerabilities. Anyone with a shred of ingenuity could exploit this. Dorn's jaw clenched. Symmetry ensures stability. Efficiency. Your obsession with asymmetry leads to chaos. Perturabo smirked faintly, folding his arms. Chaos? No. Adaptability. Your fortress is a static relic unprepared for unconventional strategies or surprises. Sweet Liberty aside, it wouldn't take me long to find its weak points. Dorn's eye twitched ever so slightly. There are no weak points. There are several weak points. No. Yes. No. The angle of these battlements is 0.47 degrees off optimal. Perturabo jabbed a finger at the hololith. A properly calibrated macro cannon could exploit this flaw. Dorn's tone remained steady as a siege wall. It is not a flaw. It is a killbox, a geometrically perfect zone of annihilation. An annihilation of your own resources, perhaps, Perturabo shot back. These walls should be 43% thicker. And where are the subterranean facilities? A proper fortress should extend 20 kilometers underground. The walls are precisely as thick as they need to be, Dorn replied, voice edged with finality. Anything more would be excessive. Excessive. Perturabo's voice rose with incredulity. There is no such thing as excessive fortification. And these turret placements octagonal? Octagonal. Octagonal turrets provide superior coverage. Hexagonal is better. This is basic geometry, Dorn. You wouldn't know superior geometry if it built itself around you. Franklin chuckled, watching the rising storm with amusement. You two know you're basically the same person, right? Just two sides of the same siege hammer. Both Primarches turned on him with synchronized scowls. We are nothing alike. They barked in unison, before immediately glaring at each other for the unintentional agreement. Franklin held up his hands in mock surrender. All right, all right. Don't shoot the messenger. Please, continue. Perturabo grabbed the hololithic controls and began furiously altering Dorn's design. Observe, brother. Using superior Iron Warrior's methodology. Dorn cut him off, voice cold as ceramite. Your so-called methodology couldn't protect a birdhouse from a determined attack. Ha! Your rigidity invites destruction. A fortress should adapt. Transform. It should become a weapon itself. This is why you fail, Dorn retorted. You overcomplicate what should be simple. The purity of defense lies in its immutability. Your fortress is a monument to stagnation. Your fortress is a chaotic heap of inefficiency. The argument escalated, their voices echoing through the chamber as other Primarches began to gather. Magnus the Red smirked as he sipped from a goblet of wine. Ah, the eternal debate of walls versus spikes. It never gets old. Sanguinius chuckled, folding his arms. They're like storm clouds in a thunderstorm. Should we stop them, or just enjoy the show? Let it play out, Guilliman said with a grin. This is far too entertaining to interrupt. Franklin leaned back in his chair, thoroughly enjoying the chaos. This is exactly why I invited you both. You two are hilarious. Be silent, both brothers snapped at him, causing Franklin to burst into laughter. Magnus leaned toward Guilliman, his expression conspiratorial. Do we start betting now? Guilliman shook his head, smiling. There's no winner here, just endless stubbornness. Sanguinius nodded solemnly. True wisdom, brother. A/N, so due to the recent circumstances, and well preferences really, by next month I believe the updates would undoubtedly slow down. A/N, why you might ask, a few years ago I worked as a seafarer and left it to work as a manager in a local restaurant, and well it's been 2 years since, and dealing with people is not my strong suit, nor do I want to keep dealing with people my entire life. A/N, and now since you my readers have been rather invested in Franklin's journey, I would not like to stop writing, nor would I stop writing, but as you know, although technology had been rapidly advancing, I still do not know if the ship I'm assigned to has Wi-Fi. If so, yes, I can continue writing and update it, and if it's not, unfortunate, but chapter updates are about to be highly unpredictable. Chapter 167, The Lord of Iron and the Eye of Terror. Perturabo strode silently through the cavernous halls of the Library of Congress in Nova Libertas. The sheer scale of the repository astounded him, though he would never admit it aloud. Shelves stretched upwards into what seemed like infinity, each packed with tomes that whispered the echoes of forgotten eras. The air was alive with the scent of aged paper and the faint hum of preservation fields, keeping centuries-old texts pristine. The quiet was oppressive but comforting, a fortress of knowledge that shielded against the chaos of ignorance. As he moved through the rows, his eyes scanned the spines of books with the precision of a data engine, each title catalogued in his mind. He had spent a year since his rediscovery devouring the knowledge of terra philosophy, engineering, military strategy, mathematics. Yet here, in the heart of Franklin Valorian's domain, he discovered something uniquely captivating, the works of humanity's forgotten geniuses. Perturabo paused, pulling a thin volume from a shelf. The name etched on the cover was one he had encountered before: Tesla. The inventor's ideas, absurdly ahead of his time, had languished in obscurity for centuries before achieving recognition. He turned the pages, absorbing theories of wireless energy, alternating current, and speculative devices that bordered on alchemy. With a faint smirk, he noted how many of these concepts would be trivial for even a Mechanicum adept, yet they represented the dreams of a mind unshackled by convention. It was not Tesla alone. Perturabo had read of Turing, whose thoughts on computation foreshadowed the creation of the men of iron, of Da Vinci, whose sketches hinted at the potential of flight centuries before it was realized, and of countless others whose brilliance was eclipsed by the limitations of their era. These minds fascinated him not because they were flawless, but because they had dared to reach beyond the flawed boundaries of their world. Yet, as much as Perturabo marveled, something gnawed at him, an itch beneath the armor of his intellect. It was always there, like a shadow on the edge of his vision. It had haunted him since childhood on Olympia, a persistent awareness of flaws, of imperfections that screamed for correction. Every stone in a wall, every gear in a machine, every structure he encountered bore the taint of inefficiency. Even now, amidst this sanctuary of human thought, he felt it. His gaze drifted across the library, and there it was, gaps in symmetry, inconsistencies in shelving, a corner where light and shadow failed to meet in harmony. The flaws coalesced in his mind, forming a dark void that threatened to consume his focus. The maw. That was what he had come to call it. A yawning chasm of imperfection that seemed to stretch across reality itself. No matter where he looked, it was always there, glaring at him with silent accusation. It wasn't simply that the universe was imperfect, it was as though it taunted him, daring him to fix what others could not even perceive. He clenched his fists, the leather of his gloves creaking under the strain. With a sharp breath, Perturabo closed the book in his hands and set it back on the shelf. This was no place for him now. He needed clarity, or perhaps simply distraction. Turning on his heel, he began to make his way through the labyrinthine halls, his footsteps echoing against the polished floors. He descended deeper into the palace, toward the one place he knew might offer reprieve from his thoughts, Franklin Valorian's workshop. Perturabo stood in the elevator, his arms crossed, his mind as sharp and restless as ever. The hum of the machinery was barely audible, a testament to the precision engineering of Nova Libertas. The elevator was a marvel, one of countless in the sprawling labyrinthine complexes that connected Franklin's palace to the essential institutions of the city. The Library of Congress, the White House, research centers, and more were all linked by tunnels that spanned kilometers beneath the bustling metropolis. Yet, as sophisticated as this transport system was, Perturabo found no joy in its design. There were flaws minor, inconsequential to most, but glaring to him. Every joint, every seam, Every suboptimal allocation of resources seemed to cry out for correction. But today, his focus wasn't on the tunnels or the elevator. He stepped out as the elevator door slid open with a whisper, entering the polished expanse of the Eternity Gate. A shimmering barrier of energy marked the gateway to Franklin's underground workshop. As Perturabo stepped through, it felt like walking through a membrane of liquid light. It was instantaneous yet strangely tangible, a brief sensation of being submerged in an ocean of impossible potential. When he emerged on the other side, the sharp metallic tang of the forge hit him like a tidal wave. The clanging of iron against iron filled the air, punctuated by the hiss of coolant and the roar of flames. Perturabo's sharp gaze swept across the vast workshop. It was more than a forge, it was a cathedral of ingenuity. Machinery of impossible complexity lined the walls, their forms sleek and efficient, pulsing with energy. Engineers, scientists, and artisans, some of the greatest minds in the galaxy, moved about with singular focus. This was a place where innovation and creation reigned supreme, a sanctuary for those who dared to dream beyond the stars. In the center of it all, Franklin stood, his broad figure illuminated by the glow of molten metal and hollow displays. Beside him, the hulking Fukin worked with his characteristic intensity, his dark skin glistening with the heat of the forge as he scrutinized a data slate. Nearby, a group of scientists and engineers clustered around a single, imposing object, a suit of power armor unlike any Perturabo had ever seen. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if bending the light around it, and Perturabo needed no explanation to deduce its purpose. This was no ordinary armor, it was designed to bend space and time itself. Perturabo's analytical mind immediately began dissecting the design. Flaws leapt out at him like cracks in glass. The alignment of the energy conduits was inefficient, the material composition suboptimal, and the mechanisms for stabilizing the temporal distortions, amateurish, at best. He bit back a scowl, unwilling to let his irritation show. For all its flaws, the armor represented a feat of engineering that few could even attempt, let alone achieve. And yet, Perturabo could not help but think how he would have done it better. His gaze shifted to Fukin, who was entirely absorbed in crafting an artifact of some sort. Perturabo noted the precision of his movements, the deliberate care with which he handled each component. It was impressive work, no doubt commissioned by Franklin. Only their cavalier brother would think to commission something of such astronomical value. Perturabo mused that whatever Fukin was creating must be worth entire solar systems, given the sheer scale of resources Franklin had marshaled for this endeavor. The absurd wealth and influence his brother wielded never ceased to astonish and, if he were honest with himself, to irk him. Perturabo's thoughts were interrupted as Franklin turned, his ever-present smirk widening as he noticed him. That infuriating smirk, so casual, so self-assured. Perturabo could already hear the inevitable greeting forming in Franklin's mind. Peter Turbo. The names grated on his nerves, but he had learned to tolerate them. At least Franklin acknowledged him, acknowledged his motives, his struggles, his accomplishments. That was more than could be said for many of their siblings. Franklin leaned back slightly, his arms crossed as he watched Perturabo approach. Well, if it isn't my favorite structural perfectionist. What brings you down to the belly of the beast, Perty? Perturabo inhaled deeply, letting the air out in a slow, measured breath. He refused to rise to the bait. Curiosity, he replied evenly. I heard you were up to something ambitious. It appears I wasn't misinformed. His gaze flicked to the power armor. Though I must say, I expected more. Franklin's grin widened. Oh, come now. Don't be shy. Tell us what's wrong with it. You know you want to. Perturabo's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer to the armor, his gaze sweeping over its surface with the precision of a scanner. The energy conduits are misaligned. You're losing at least 7.3% efficiency. The stabilizers for the temporal field are insufficiently insulated, which will cause catastrophic instability under prolonged use. And the alloy composition of the plating. He tilted his head, his voice taking on a faint note of disdain. Is subpar. It won't withstand sustained pressure from a temporal singularity. The room grew quiet as the gathered scientists and engineers exchanged uneasy glances. Franklin, however, seemed entirely unperturbed. See? This is why I love having you around, Perty. You've got an eye for these things. So, what would you do to fix it? Perturabo's lips pressed into a thin line. He could see what Franklin was doing, but he couldn't resist the challenge. The conduits need to be realigned along these axes, he said, pointing to the hollow display and tracing a new configuration with his finger. Replace the stabilizers with a composite material that can withstand higher thermal and electromagnetic loads. And as for the plating, he turned to Fukin, who had paused his work to listen. You should forge a new alloy. Something with enhanced molecular cohesion. I assume that's within your capabilities. Fukin raised an eyebrow, his lips twitching into a faint smile. It's within my capabilities, he replied. Excellent, Perturabo said, folding his arms. Then perhaps this project will reach the standard it should have achieved in the first place. Franklin clapped his hands together, the sound echoing through the chamber. Now that's the spirit. See, this is why I keep you around, Perty. Always pushing us to be better. Perturabo shot him a withering glare. I'm not here to amuse you, Franklin. Franklin's smirk didn't falter. Oh, you do that for free. Perturabo exhaled sharply through his nose, resisting the urge to snap back. Instead, he turned his attention to the room, observing the frenetic activity of the eggheads, as Franklin called them. Despite his irritation, Perturabo couldn't deny the sheer brilliance of what was being attempted here. The resources, the talent, the ambition, it was all a testament to Franklin's unique blend of vision and audacity. For whom is this armor being made? Perturabo asked after a moment, his tone carefully neutral. Franklin's expression softened slightly, his smirk giving way to something more thoughtful. Someone who'll need it, he said simply. Someone who's going to do something extraordinary, and that someone is me. Perturabo studied his brother's face, searching for any hint of deception or mockery. But for once, Franklin seemed entirely sincere. It was unsettling, in its own way. If you want this armor to succeed, Perturabo said, his voice quieter now, you'll need more than just ambition. You'll need perfection. Franklin nodded, his gaze steady. And that's why you're here, brother. To make sure we get it right. Perturabo held his gaze for a long moment before finally nodding. He wouldn't admit it aloud, but there was a part of him, a small, stubborn part, that was glad to be here. Glad to be acknowledged. Glad to contribute to something that might just transcend even his own lofty standards. The elevator doors opened to the surface, revealing a pristine beachfront that stretched out into a tranquil sea. The sound of gentle waves breaking on the shore mixed with the cries of gulls circling overhead. The golden hues of the setting sun bathed the scene in warmth, a stark contrast to the cold iron of Perturabo's thoughts. Franklin Valorian stepped out first, his easy gait and smirking face a sharp juxtaposition to Perturabo's rigid posture. Franklin reached into a cooler and handed Perturabo a glass of amasec. So, what is it you wanted to talk about, brother? He asked, his tone casual but laced with curiosity. Perturabo accepted the drink with a curt nod, taking a moment to compose his thoughts. Franklin's demeanor, as ever, was infuriatingly light-hearted. Even now, the Cavalier of the Liberty Eagles was chuckling softly, undoubtedly finding amusement in Perturabo's uncharacteristic request for a private discussion. You're usually glaring at me or breathing heavily, Franklin teased, leaning back against a stone railing. So what has the Lord of Iron all riled up? I recognize that look, Peter. Perturabo exhaled sharply, deciding to ignore the nickname. He had long since given up trying to correct Franklin's insistence on butchering his name. There is something I have been seeing, he began, his voice measured and deliberate. Moi. It appears at the edge of my vision, shifting, always just out of reach. At certain angles, I can see it clearly, a gaping void where the fabric of reality itself seems to unravel. Franklin's expression shifted slightly, his smirk giving way to a more contemplative look. Moi, you say? Can you describe it further? Perturabo hesitated. It is as if the warp and real space overlap. At its center, there is a hole. A tear in the fabric of reality. He clenched his jaw, his discomfort evident. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps no one could understand what I am seeing. Franklin's grin returned, though it was softer this time. A hole in the fabric of reality? Brother, that sounds like the Eye of Terror. The Eye of Terror. Perturabo repeated, his brow furrowing. Yes, Franklin replied, casually swirling his glass of amasec. A ghastly piece of work, really. A massive warp storm, a wall of chaos and madness. Occasionally, nasty things come out of it, but it's mostly contained. Since you can see it, let me formally explain. This is classified information, of course, but knowing you, you're not one for gossip. Perturabo grunted in irritation, but he did not refute the statement. Franklin's grin widened. What do you think the warp is, Perty? He asked, using the nickname with deliberate playfulness. Perturabo's response was immediate, his tone clipped. It is another realm. A dimension separate from our own, one that we barely understand. Not bad, Franklin said, nodding approvingly. But there's more to it than that. Come with me. I'll show you something. Without waiting for a response, Franklin activated an eternity gate. Perturabo followed reluctantly, stepping through the shimmering portal. The transition was as seamless as before, but the sight that greeted him on the other side was anything but serene. A colossal, swirling vortex of energy dominated the sky, its chaotic tendrils of light and shadow reaching out like grasping claws. The sheer scale of it was almost incomprehensible, a tear in reality that pulsed with a malevolent energy. Welcome to Kadian, brother, Franklin said, gesturing grandly. The Kadian Gate. Perturabo's gaze shifted from the Eye of Terror to the planet itself. Kadian was a fortress world in every sense of the word. Massive planetary gun batteries loomed over the landscape, their barrels trained skyward. Trenches and walls, some shaped like intricate star patterns, crisscrossed the terrain. Titans and armored grav tanks patrolled alongside Liberty Eagle Astartes and the planet's stalwart defenders, the Liberty Guard. Even the skies were alive with activity, ships patrolling in precise formations. You've turned this world into a fortress, Perturabo observed, his voice laced with grudging respect. Heavily fortified is an understatement. With these defenses, Kadian could withstand hundreds of years of siege. He paused, his analytical mind already dissecting the planet's strategic layout. But if I were to arrange its defenses, it would stand forever. Franklin's laugh was warm and genuine. And that's exactly why I brought you here, Peter. I believe you could do a better job fortifying the Kadian Gate than Dorn ever could. For the first time in their conversation, Perturabo allowed himself a small smirk. Who is the enemy? He asked, his tone sharp. Franklin's expression became more serious. That, brother, is classified. Perturabo's smirk vanished, replaced by a glare. The defenses here clearly serve to counter the warp, he said, his voice heavy with implication. You expect an attack? Franklin nodded slowly. In time, you'll know. For now, you'll have to trust Father's plan. Perturabo fell silent, his mind racing. Franklin's words hinted at a grand design, a secret so monumental that even he, one of the Emperor's Primarches, was not privy to it. The implications were staggering, and for the first time in a long while, Perturabo felt a flicker of curiosity mingled with unease. As they stood beneath the looming shadow of the Eye of Terror, the silence between them spoke volumes. Perturabo's gaze remained fixed on the swirling vortex in the sky, his thoughts a whirlwind of speculation and resolve. Franklin, ever the cavalier, simply watched his brother with a knowing smile, his own thoughts concealed behind his easygoing facade. Come, Peter, Franklin said at last, clapping his brother on the shoulder. Let's see how you'd rearrange the defenses. I'll even let you rename the fortifications if it makes you feel better. Perturabo allowed himself a rare chuckle, the sound low and almost imperceptible. You may regret that offer, Franklin. Franklin's laughter echoed across the fortress world of Kadian, a sound of camaraderie and confidence that, despite himself, Perturabo found strangely reassuring. Together, they turned back toward the fortress, two brothers bound by purpose and mystery, standing on the precipice of a grand design that neither fully understood but both were destined to shape. Kadian stands on the wings of liberty. Chapter 168, Liberty and Faerans. Franklin Valorian walked the ashen ground, his boots crunching softly against the desolate landscape. The air, heavy with the acrid scent of burnt wraithbone and scorched metal, seemed to hum with the remnants of battle. Before him lay the massive, shattered body of a craft world, its once graceful curves twisted into jagged ruins that impaled the planet's surface like a colossal spear from the heavens. The sky above was a sickly grey, clouded by ash and dust, and the horizon stretched endlessly with the aftermath of carnage. Corpses of Eldar warriors and Necron constructs littered the ground, their frozen poses telling the story of a battle fought with desperate fury and unyielding resolve. In his mind, Cain's voice resounded, sharp and commanding but laced with a quiet urgency that betrayed the war god's own concerns. My shard lies deep within this planet. Deeper than even these ruins, Valorian. Do not delay. Franklin's perpetual smirk twitched as he surveyed the eerie tableau. Well, Let's go get it, then. Not every day I get to walk through a living mystery. Besides, I've got nothing better to do today. He advanced toward the ruins with steady purpose, pausing now and then to examine the battlefield more closely. The intricately carved wraithbone of Eldar guardians was fused with the cold, unyielding alloys of Necron warriors, the two materials locked in violent harmony. He crouched near a shattered wraith lord, its weapon still buried in the skull of a Necron overlord, and scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Tell me, Kadian," Franklin said, his voice carrying a note of amused curiosity, "why would a craft world crash onto a tomb world? Or, did the tomb world crash into the craft world? It's like a cosmic game of chicken, and I'm not sure who lost worse." Kadian's voice carried an edge of disdain, as if the question itself was beneath him. The Eldar likely foresaw the awakening of this tomb world and sought to destroy it before it could rise. Perhaps they believed that activating my avatar would turn the tide in their favor. Or the Necrons, in their arrogance, unleashed one of their enslaved C'tan, forcing the Eldar to act. Either way, it was folly. Franklin chuckled, standing and dusting off his hands. "I guess we'll find out soon enough. Let's hope this shard of yours isn't in a hurry." The labyrinthine halls of the Necron tomb world swallowed Franklin whole as he ventured deeper. The architectural mastery of the ancient Necron-tier civilization was on full display, every wall, every corridor reflecting an eerie, mathematical precision. Franklin couldn't help but marvel at the designs. "Now this," he said, running his hand along the smooth metallic surface, "is what I call engineering. Massive chambers, interdimensional geometry, and stasis tech to keep the boys fresh for millions of years. Honestly, Kadian, this is some top-tier stuff." "Their mastery of such principles is irrelevant," Kadian snapped. "It will not save them." "Oh, don't be like that. You gotta appreciate the artistry. You think I can make my own tomb world after this? Maybe a craft world too? Humanity be taking another big leap." Franklin's smirk widened. "Course, I'd have to give it a nice paint job. Can't have it looking all gloomy." Kadian's silence spoke volumes. As they moved deeper, Franklin entered a vast chamber, its size utterly dwarfing anything he'd seen so far. Before him lay row upon row of Necron soldiers in stasis, their numbers stretching into the trillions. Franklin let out a low whistle. "Good thing they're disabled, hey? If this tomb world wasn't half-wrecked from their scrap with the craft world, we'd already be up to our necks in Canopitech constructs. Scarabs, spiders, the whole creepy-crawly brigade. The Eldar left their mark here," Kadian noted. "Their desperation and their defiance are evident in the carnage." Franklin glanced at a nearby scene, a wraith guard missing a leg, its blade still buried in the chest of a destroyer lord. Similar clashes littered the floors they traversed. Broken forms of Eldar and Necron alike stood as silent witnesses to a war that had long since ended. "You've gotta admit," Franklin said, "your folks knew how to go out with a bang. If they hadn't been so stubborn, maybe they'd still be around." "Their pride was their undoing," Kadian said curtly. "Speaking of pride," Franklin said, a mischievous glint in his eyes, "have you ever thought about picking up a hobby? All this blood and war stuff, it's gotta get stale after a while." "A hobby?" Kadian's voice was incredulous. "You jest." "I'm serious," Franklin replied, though his grin betrayed him. "What about gardening? I hear it's relaxing. Plant some crops, water them with the blood of your enemies, watch 'em grow. Could be your thing." Kadian scoffed, his voice tinged with mockery. "You're starting to sound like Isha. Peace, gardens, and nurturing her children. Relax and tend to flowers, is that it?" Franklin smirked. "Sounds like a dream, honestly. Wife material, even." Kadian's voice softened for a moment, tinged with nostalgia. "She was a mother to all, gentle, emotional, and, yes, annoying. Always pleading for mercy for mortals. She had a lover, Horus, the god of the hunt and desire. A gift and a curse, that one. His influence led to both prosperity and avarice, the seeds of the fall." "Sounds like someone who valued freedom," Franklin mused. "Freedom is a double-edged sword." Kadian agreed. "In some ways, Horus was like you, cavalier, unrelenting. But you're more than a hunter. You're a builder, an industrialist and preferred guns. Horus was a falcon, you, an eagle. But I digress." Franklin chuckled. "I'm curious what was life like for the Ildari pantheon." Kadian paused before responding, his voice contemplative. Mortals and gods lived similarly in some ways, though gods are everlasting and wield reality itself as their plaything. Isha was ever gentle, ever pleading for the mortals. She annoyed me to no end, always asking me to spare them. Kadian cackled darkly. Of course, I didn't. Franklin shook his head with a laugh. You're incorrigible, Kadian. Franklin and Kadian walked deeper into the tomb world, his boots echoing against the cold, metallic floors. The deeper they descended, the more Franklin found himself musing about the peculiarities of alien technology. He turned to Kadian, his tone tinged with a mix of curiosity and admiration. You know, Kadian, wraithbone has got to be the most versatile material I've ever seen. Think about it, the Eldar literally sing it into existence. Through a mix of their psychic prowess and an infusion of warp energy, voila! You've got wraithbone. It can be as thick and durable as auramite, and it regenerates as efficiently as tyranimite. He paused, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Only downside? You've got to be a psychic race to manipulate it. That rules out most of humanity. Well, except for the technoseers and the human psychers trained in the ways of the Bonezingers from an exchange program of Ulthwi and Nova Libertas. Kadian's voice resonated in Franklin's mind, carrying a note of exasperation. The technoseers? And what, pray tell, did you create to circumvent this limitation? Franklin grinned, the expression practically audible in his voice. Had to improvise. I built a whole unit around the idea. Believe it or not, they came from the music industry of Nova Libertas. A pop idol group, to be exact. All of them, as it happens, turned out to have remarkable psyker potential. There was a long pause before Kadian's sigh echoed through Franklin's thoughts. This is how human culture works? Truly, vastly different from the Eldar. Franklin laughed. You've got to admit, it's creative. The idol group sings and dances, and their resonance creates massive amounts of wraithbone. Meanwhile, the technoseers handle the molding and shaping. It's a team effort. Kadian's tone turned incredulous. Why is everything mass production to you, Franklin? What can I say? Franklin shrugged. Efficiency is key. Besides, it's not like I'm kicking the Eldar out of business. Human-synthesized wraithbone is incompatible with Eldar systems, and vice versa. Everyone keeps their niche. The duo pressed on, navigating the vast corridors littered with the remnants of a massive battle. Dead Eldar and Necron soldiers were everywhere. The deeper they ventured, the more the scene evolved. Aspect warriors and immortals lay intermingled in the grim tapestry of war. Franklin knelt by a fallen striking scorpion, its ornate armor cracked and charred. Looks like the Eldar really didn't want this tomb world waking up. Kadian's voice was somber. For good reason. The Necron are formidable. That is no doubt. They continued onward, their path eventually leading them to a vast chamber that radiated an oppressive stillness. Franklin's sharp eyes took in the sight of the central power core. At its heart stood what appeared to be a tachyon power core, though it was broken and inactive. The faint hum of dormant machinery filled the air, lending an eerie undertone to the scene. Beyond the power core loomed a massive door of black stone. Its dark, impenetrable surface seemed to absorb the light around it, casting the room into an unnatural gloom. Franklin approached it cautiously, his instincts on high alert. Kadian's voice resonated with a mix of determination and unease. My shard lies beyond that door. Franklin glanced at the black stone, his brow furrowing. And something else, I'm guessing. Kadian's tone darkened. An old enemy. A Cetan. Both my shard and the Cetan are imprisoned within. They slumber, their power contained by the black stone. Franklin folded his arms, studying the door. Blackstone, that's a serious prison. I'm guessing it's isolating your shard from you. Indeed, Kadian replied. Were it not for my near-complete state, I wouldn't have been able to sense it at all. The black stone suppresses its connection to me. As they reached the central power core chamber, Franklin paused and studied the massive black stone door in front of him. He gestured to the dormant core at its center. Before we try and open these doors, which, honestly, need power, we're going to need a proper setup. He activated his COMM link, his voice crisp and authoritative. Sweet Liberty, this is Franklin. Send down men to construct defensive positions for extraction and to collect all the essential tech. Disable the defenses of the tomb world and begin analysis on how to separate the tomb world and the broken craft world. We're taking these babies home. The response was immediate. Copy that, Primarch. Over. Within minutes, the scene outside transformed. Liberty Eagles Astartes and Liberty Guard descended onto the surface, followed by teams of scientists and tech priests. The tech priests busied themselves hauling unsecured Necrons onto their ships, while the Libertan scientists delved into retrieving data from the Tomb World's central computer systems. Reports streamed through Franklin's visor, each one detailing progress and findings. Yet one particular report caught his eye. Data on matter conversion. He murmured, reading further. The details elaborated on the Canopitec constructs, particularly the Scarab's ability to convert materials into black stone. Franklin couldn't suppress the smirk spreading across his face. Now that's something. Hours passed as the teams worked tirelessly. An imposing fortress rose among the artificial hills, complete with a massive moat and a blend of ancient design and futuristic technology. It stood as both an extraction zone and a defensive bastion, its construction a testament to the efficiency and ingenuity of the Libertans. Back in the central chamber, Franklin stood before the inactive power core. In his hand, he held a similar tachyon power core, its size dwarfed by his immense fist. He examined it briefly before tossing the old, damaged core aside. "Ready, Kadian?" he asked, his smirk firmly in place. "Always," came the resolute reply. As Franklin placed the tachyon power core into the console, the tomb world began to stir. The dormant systems awoke with a low, resonating hum that reverberated through the ancient halls. Lights flickered to life, casting eerie green glows along the metallic walls. Almost immediately, the Necron legions began to awaken, their unrelenting presence signaled by the grinding sound of stasis chambers opening. From the fortress above, Franklin's COMM link erupted with reports of conflict. "Primarch, this is Sweet Liberty Command. Necrons are emerging from Eternity Gates across the surface. They're attacking everything: our forces, the atmosphere, even our scouting nanomachines. It's chaos out here." Franklin's expression darkened as he listened, his hand tightening around Anaris. He turned to Kadian, who observed the scene with grim silence. "Looks like we've stirred the hornet's nest," Franklin muttered. Kadian's voice resonated in his mind, cold and commanding. "Then fight as you always do, Franklin. Show them why the Eldar gods chose you." The clash of battle echoed through the halls as Necron warriors emerged in relentless waves. Canopitec constructs scuttled across the walls and ceilings, their insectoid forms swarming toward the intruders. Scarabs and spiders converged on the microscopic level, engaging the nanomachines released by the Independence sector in a strange, invisible war. Above, the Liberty Eagles and the Liberty Guard fought valiantly, their defensive positions barely holding under the relentless assault. Within the depths of the tomb world, Franklin spun around as a Canopitec wraith phased through the wall, its claws poised to strike. With a single fluid motion, he swung Anaris, slicing the construct cleanly in half. Sparks and shards of necrodermis scattered across the chamber, but there was no time to revel in the victory. More constructs emerged, their relentless attacks forcing Franklin to fight with the precision and power of a warrior born for combat. "They're everywhere," Franklin growled, decapitating a Canopitec spider with a single strike. "Kadian, keep your shard ready. This is going to get messy." As the room cleared for a brief moment, Franklin's instincts flared. A blur of black metal and an eerie green blade streaked toward him. Franklin barely had time to raise Anaris, the two weapons clashing in a brilliant spray of sparks. The force of the blow sent a shockwave through the chamber, and Franklin found himself face to face with a Necron of undeniable presence. The being's ornate necrodermis gleamed with an authority that could only belong to one of the Necron elite. The Necron overlord's eyes glowed with a cold, malevolent light as he spoke, his voice a grating mix of metallic resonance and ancient disdain. "What manner of creature are you?" he sneered. "You wield the power of a psychic being, yet your physical strength alone strains the servos of my body. And your technology?" The Overlord's gaze swept over Franklin with a calculating intensity. "Your race, transcending its mortal confines, creeping ever closer to the greatness of the original Necron tier. Still, it will not save you. You will fall before me, as countless others have." Franklin smirked, the ever-present confidence in his demeanor undiminished. With a swift kick, he pushed the Necron Overlord back, creating a brief distance between them. He leveled Anaris at the imposing figure, his voice steady and unyielding. "I am Franklin Valorian, puny Xenos. Lord of the 11th Legion, Prince of the Imperium of Man. My father is the Emperor of Mankind, and soon, the galaxy will be in our palms. You would do well to respect us, old-timer." The Overlord's metallic face twisted into what could almost be mistaken for a smirk, a faint echo of the pride and arrogance that once defined the Necrontyr. "You stand before Faerun Hectorak, the eternally bound," he declared, his voice rising with a regal authority that demanded submission. "I am one of the Triarchy, second only to the Silent King himself. I am the greatest among my people, the pinnacle of Necron perfection. And you, insignificant fleshbag, will know despair before the end." Their words hung in the air like a storm, the tension between them crackling with unspoken challenges. Franklin moved first, closing the distance with a burst of speed that caught even the ancient Faerun off guard. An arrow sang through the air, its blade flashing with divine energy as it met Hectoraka's green warriorship. The clash sent shockwaves rippling through the chamber, shaking the walls and scattering debris. Chapter 169, Faeruns Die Twice. In the depths of the tomb world, two titans of different ages clashed in a duel of immortality. Faerun Hectoraka's warriorship carved reality itself, its edge hungry for the flesh of this upstart species champion. But Franklin Valorian, Primarch of the Liberty Eagles, moved with the skill of a demigod, an arrow blazing in his grip like a captured star. The Faerun's strike aimed to separate head from shoulders, a killing blow that had ended countless lives across eons. Yet it found only the burning edge of an arrow, and in that moment of contact, Franklin's counterstroke nearly severed the ancient lord's arm. Living metal flowed like quicksilver as Hectorak withdrew, his form rippling with self-repair protocols older than humanity's earliest dreams of fire. Reality shimmered as the Necron Lord activated his chronometron, his form becoming a ghost image of probability and quantum uncertainty. But Franklin had seen such tricks before. His first Captain Denzel's mastery of similar devices had taught him their weaknesses. Where technology sought to bend time, the warp could tear it asunder. With a thought, Franklin extended his will. Space itself congealed around them, time grinding to a halt save for their private arena of combat. Hectoraka's eyes flared with green fire as he recognized the trap, but his counterstroke was already in motion. The warriorship found a gap in Franklin's defense, shearing through tyranimite and opening a grievous rent in the Primarch's pauldron. Franklin's response came in three sharp retorts as the last word spoke, each bolt finding its mark in the Faerun's joints with surgical precision. Ancient mechanisms groaned in protest as Hectoraka's form betrayed him, forcing one knee to buckle beneath him. But even as he fell, the Necron Lord's cloak began to pulse with otherworldly energy. "He wields the cloak of the star gods," Kadian's voice thundered in Franklin's mind. "Beware." Time's arrow, a spell that could erase its target from the very fabric of reality, lanced forth from Hectoraka's extended hand. Franklin channeled everything he had into an arrow, the blade becoming a torch that could ignite suns. The two forces met in a collision that shook the foundations of the tomb world itself, filling the chamber with debris and actinic light. Through the chaos, they continued their lethal exchange. Franklin's weapon shifted forms instantly, sword to spear to halberd, each transformation forcing new calculations, new responses from the Faerun's ancient combat protocols. Sparks flew as hyperphase blade met ancient psychocrystal, each clash a note in a symphony of destruction. Hectorak phased through a missile strike, his form becoming momentarily incorporeal before solidifying to destroy the weapon mount and land a crushing blow that caved in part of Franklin's helmet. The Primarch tore the damaged protection free, his face briefly exposed before the auto-repair systems restored his helmet to wholeness. Then came a moment of stillness, a pause in their duel as the Faerun's ancient voice filled the chamber. "Tell me, young prince," Hectoraka's words carried the weight of eons, "when did your species first draw breath?" "When last I walked among the stars," the Eldari thought themselves masters of all they surveyed. 30,000 years ago, Franklin replied, his voice level despite the revelation such numbers must represent to his opponent. "We're relatively new to the galactic stage." The Faerun's laughter echoed like metal striking metal. "From mere aquatic life to galactic power in such a short span? Impressive. Though I see the shadow of your own dark age upon you." Franklin's silence spoke volumes, and Hectorak pressed his advantage not with blade, but with words that cut deeper than any physical weapon. "No pacifist species ever ruled the stars, young one. Like the Necrontyr before you, you reach out to grasp what you believe is your birthright. Tell me of this Imperium of man. Is it the child of your age of darkness?" "It is the Empire that will conquer the universe," Franklin declared, conviction burning in every word. "I stand here to make that reality." The Faerun's laughter redoubled, a sound that contained both genuine amusement and ancient, terrible knowledge. "Conquer the universe? Let me share a secret with you, child of Terra. We already conquered the universe," Hectoraka's words fell like hammers on anvils. In our enslavement to the Citan, we became instruments of ultimate conquest. We burned the old ones who denied us immortality. We scoured ancient empires from existence. The Citan consumed all life beyond the Milky Way, making our galaxy the center of all that remains. Not the Ildari in their pride, nor the Kruk in their savage might could achieve what we, as slaves, accomplished. Franklin's mind reached out to Kadian, seeking confirmation of this cosmic horror. Is this true? Yes, the war god's response carried the weight of personal memory. The Citan were the gods of Matrium made manifest. There is reason they were bound to consuming stars alone. The Necron tear giving them bodies was like opening Pandora's box. Their full power would have rendered all existence their plaything. As they were the ultimate expression of the material universe, so were we, the Ildari Pantheon, the ultimate expression of the immaterium. It took gods to slay gods, or weapons that could kill divinity itself. The chamber fell silent save for the distant hum of tomb systems, as the weight of this revelation settled like a shroud over their battlefield. Franklin stood face to face not just with an ancient warrior, but with living proof that humanity's greatest ambitions had already been achieved and surpassed by those who came before. Yet in his eyes burned not defeat, but determination. For in this revelation lay not just horror, but opportunity. If such heights had been reached before, they could be reached again. And this time, perhaps, without the price of enslavement to star-hungry gods. The Faerin raised his warriorship once more, green fire burning in his eyes. Shall we continue our duel, young prince? Now that you know the true measure of the path you walk. Franklin brought an arrow to the ready, its edge blazing with divine flame and unyielding mortal defiance. Then we shall. Even if others have walked this path before us, it doesn't make the destination any less worth reaching. Yet, even as he spoke, Franklin couldn't help but question the Faerin's words. If the Necrons had truly exterminated all life beyond the Milky Way, then what, exactly, were the Tyranids? Perhaps this Faerin was talking out of his metallic ass. And in that moment, as God-forged blade met star metal scythe once more, the tomb world bore witness to a truth as old as existence itself, that even in the face of overwhelming odds and cosmic revelations, humanity's defiant spirit would not be dimmed. From the command post atop the hill fortress, First Captain Denzel Washington surveyed a battlefield that would have made ancient generals weep. The endless silver tide of the Necron legions crashed against their defenses like a metallic tsunami, each wave bringing new horrors from humanity's darkest nightmares. Director John Ezra stood beside him, his augmented eyes scanning tactical readouts. Your assessment? Denzel asked, his hand resting on the hilt of Kusanagi no Tsurugi. Dangerous, Ezra replied, his voice carrying the weight of careful analysis. For the first time, we're not significantly ahead in the technology race. The gap between us and the Necrons is narrow enough that this has become a contest of pure military might. A slugging match between titans. The truth of his words played out across the battlefield below. Green lightning from countless gauze flares splashed against the conversion shields of Liberty Guard positions, creating a constant aurora of deflected energy. Return fire from disintegration rifles tore through the Necron ranks, reducing warriors to scattered fragments of living metal only for the fallen to begin reassembling themselves moments later or damaged enough to teleport away. In the outer gates sector, the elite immortals had breached the initial defenses. Their gauze blasters, more powerful than standard flares, were successfully overloading individual shield generators. But the Liberty Eagle's Primaris Marines met them with equal ferocity. The air filled with the screech of matter being torn apart at the atomic level as both sides' weapons found their marks. Limbs of living metal scattered across the battlefield even as Tyranimite armor was reduced to its component atoms only to resist flaying and regenerate. Across the plains, a different kind of war unfolded. Sirapetek heavy constructs, ancient war machines that made Imperial Knights look like children's toys, engaged in high-speed combat with squadrons of armored cores. The ground shook with each exchange, reality itself seeming to bend around the weapons they wielded. An armored core pilot, executing a boost slide maneuver that would have killed a normal pilot, managed to get beneath a Sirapetek's guard. Their plasma blade carved through ancient necrodermis only for the construct's singularity generator to activate, creating a localized black hole that consumed both machines in a flash of hawking radiation. The skies above were no less chaotic. F-66 interceptors, pride of the Independence Sector's aerospace forces, dueled with crescents of living metal doom scythes that had harvested souls when humanity's ancestors were still learning to make fire. A squadron leader executed a perfect thatch weave, drawing Necron fire before their wingmen eliminated 3 doom scythes with precisely targeted quantum torpedoes. Walking through this maelstrom of destruction came the Titans. An Imperator class, 100 meters of humanity's firepower stuffed and given legs, opened fire with weapons that could level mountains. Its void shields flickered as return fire from a Necron monolith struck home, but the ancient war machine's response was devastating. Energy weapons that could crack a planet's crust reduced the pyramid-shaped war engine to molecular ash. A castigator titan was wreaking havoc amongst the Necron war machines, its massive claw crushing parts of Necron megalith. But it was in the void of space that the true scale of the conflict became apparent. Battlefleet Liberty, and the Necron fleet both had inertialess drives, hence, the battle in the void became a deadly game of four-dimensional chess, with both sides leveraging their FTL capabilities to seek tactical advantage. The Independence sector's ships, guided by the combination of advanced AI and human intuition, matched the cold calculations of the Necron fleet's eons old. A Cairn-class tomb ship, large enough to eclipse a small moon, discovered this parity the hard way. The Sweet Liberty's opening salvo reduced it to expanding debris, but the victory was short-lived. Reality rippled as a world engine translated into real space, its very presence an affront to physics. The ancient superweapon, a construct that made standard Cairn-class tomb ships look like toys, brought its primary Gauss projectors to bear on Sweet Liberty. The energy discharge was bright enough to be seen from the planet's surface, a lance of green fire that could have disintegrated oceans. Sweet Liberty's quantum shields, products of reverse-engineered Necron technology, held for precious seconds before failing. But those seconds were enough. The massive vessel's temporal weapon, a device that could manipulate the fabric of causality itself, fired in response. The world engine suddenly existed in 2 places at once, its quantum state forcibly duplicated. The impossible mathematics of this situation caused both versions to implode, the ancient construct destroying itself in a paradox of its own existence. From his command post, Denzel watched the space battle through enhanced visual feeds. "They're adapting to our tactics," he noted. "Each engagement teaches them more about our capabilities. And we learn from them in turn," Ezra responded, directing a squadron of Liberty Guard to reinforce a faltering section of the defense line. This is what happens when 2 civilizations at similar technological levels meet in battle. No clear advantage, just skill against skill, will against will. A massive explosion drew their attention back to the ground war. A Necron Doomsday Arc had breached the outer perimeter, its primary weapon charging for a shot that could vaporize the entire command center. But before it could fire, a blur of motion resolved into Captain Armstrong, his nanomachine-enhanced body glowing with power. The second captain's augmented fist struck the ancient war machine with force enough to create a localized shockwave. The Doomsday Arc's power core overloaded, the resulting explosion carving a crater half a kilometer wide. "The Primiborn are worth their weight in archaeotech," Ezra commented, watching Armstrong emerge unscathed from the inferno, crushing a nearby royal warden in the same process. "Would that we had more of them here," Denzel replied, thinking of their absent brothers, each engaged in crucial missions across the sector. "But we make do with what we have." Franklin and Hectoraka's duel intensified. The Primarch's psychic might began to manifest more openly now, reality bending around him as he channeled powers that would have broken lesser minds. Golden lightning arced from his free hand while an arrow blazed with divine fire in the other. Hectorak parried each attack with the precision of eons of experience, his ancient mind analyzing this curious opponent. The Faerun had faced countless psychers across eons of warfare, the legendary Old Ones themselves, whose mastery of the Immaterium had reshaped galaxies. Yet this human warrior presented something different, something that defied his ancient combat protocol's predictions. "What manner of being are you?" Hectoraka's thoughts raced as he deflected attacks that existed simultaneously in past, present, and future. Not Eldar precise, nor Kruk brutal, yet elements of both. The Faerun's tactical engines struggled to categorize this hybrid fighting style that seemed to draw from every race's strengths while adding unique elements, for the lack of a better term, human. Franklin began weaving a complex psychic working, golden energy gathering around his hands. But Hectorak had not survived the war in heaven by allowing enemies to complete their spells. His cloak of the Cetan flared with impossible colors as he invoked one of its deadliest functions, an antimatter meteor materialized above Franklin's position. The Primarch was forced to abandon his spell, rolling away from the space-time annihilation that the meteor's impact would have caused. In that moment of disruption, Hectorak struck. The butt of his Warishith caught Franklin in the chest, staggering him. The Faerun's Warishith whistled through the air in what should have been a killing stroke. But Franklin was far from finished. The last word appeared in his hand as if by magic, and 3 precise shots struck Hectorac's face in rapid succession. The living metal of the Phaeron's features cratered under the impact, his visual sensors temporarily disrupted. It was all the opening Franklin needed. Anaris moved like liquid light, its edge burning with both divine flame and mortal defiance. The blade caught Hectorac at the waist and continued upward, bisecting the ancient lord's torso in a display of perfect swordsmanship. The Phaeron's severed form collapsed to the ground, green energy flickering from the catastrophic damage. Franklin allowed himself a moment to catch his breath, but Cain's voice thundered in his mind, "Do not lower your guard. The lords of the Necrontyr always carry the means of their own resurrection." The warning came just in time. A flash of solar brilliance filled the chamber as Hectorac's resurrection orb activated. Living metal flowed like quicksilver, rebuilding the Phaeron's form in seconds. Where there had been a broken wreck, now stood the undamaged form of one of the galaxy's most ancient rulers. Hectorac straightened to his full height, adjusting his grip on his warriorship with an almost casual air. "Most impressive, Valorian," the Phaeron's voice carried genuine appreciation. "Few indeed have ever bested me in personal combat. None have done so wielding such a fascinating combination of skills." The ancient lord's green eyes studied Franklin with renewed interest. "You wield the sword forms of my old enemies with remarkable skill. Your psychic abilities, while not matching the raw power of the old ones, show innovation I would not have expected." And then, Hectorac gestured to where the last word rested in Franklin's grip, "There is that uniquely human element. The integration of what your kind calls gunplay into personal combat. Truly fascinating. You are unique among your species, Franklin Valorian," Hectorac continued, his tone carrying the weight of one who had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. "In you, I see echoes of every race that has ever challenged us for dominion of the stars. Yet you remain undeniably human, perhaps that is what makes you so dangerous." Hectorac, acknowledging his defeat in single combat, raised his ancient hands in a gesture that split the fabric of space-time. Dimensional portals materialized in a perfect circle around them, each crackling with emerald energy that spoke of power older than humanity's oldest dreams. "You have proven yourself superior in the art of the duel, Valorian," the Phaeron's voice carried both respect and deadly purpose. "But we Necrontyr were never known for individual combat prowess. That was always the Ildari's obsession. From each portal emerged the elite of the elite, Triarch Praetorians, the guardians of Necron martial tradition. Their rod weapons hummed with barely contained energy as they formed an honor guard around their lord." But Hectorac wasn't finished. With a gesture that seemed to bend light itself, he commanded the massive black stone gates to open. What emerged from beyond those gates was darkness given form, death given purpose. Ozagorod, the Nightbringer, one of the most terrible of the Cetan, materialized like a tear in reality's fabric. Yet something was wrong. The star god moved to strike at Hectorac, only to find itself unable to complete the action. "What have you done, slave?" The Nightbringer's voice was the sound of stars dying, of galaxies screaming. But Hectorac was unfazed, his expression as unyielding as the metallic frame he inhabited. "Something we should have done eons ago," he replied with calm disdain. "Shackling gods." The Nightbringer roared in defiance, raising its scythe as if to strike its captor, but its movements faltered. Its form shuddered, fighting against the invisible chains of Hectorac's will. The Phaeron's gesture was sharp and commanding. "Now, kill my opponent in front of me, slave." The Nightbringer's resistance was palpable, but the chains of its enslavement held fast. It turned toward Franklin, its soulless gaze now fixed on him. The scythe swung with an unnatural speed, a sweeping arc of death aimed directly at the Primarch. But before it could land, another blade wreathed in flames intercepted it with a thunderous clash. Franklin allowed himself a small smirk, not even having moved from his position. "Escalating the battle, are we, Phaeron? If you're going to summon your god, then it's only fair I summon mine." From the clash of weapons emerged a figure wreathed in divine flame, Cain in his full warrior aspect, his laughter echoing through the chamber like clashing steel. "Remember me, Ozagorod? The one who taught you the meaning of pain." "Cain." The Nightbringer spoke the name like a curse, memory of its previous shattering evident in its tone. Hectorac gestured to his Praetorians, their weapons training on Franklin from all angles. But the Primarch's response was not fear, it was preparation for his own escalation. Planting Anaris firmly before him, Franklin spoke words in ancient Ildari that seemed to burn the air itself, "Ignis ascendit." The chamber erupted in flames that spoke of war itself, not the random destruction of natural fire, but the purposeful conflagration of divine conflict. From these flames stepped the ever-chosen of Kadian, their eyes burning with the same fire that had forged stars. These were warriors who had transcended death itself, bound to Kadian's service for eternity, and now they stood ready once more to wage war in their god's name. The chamber had become an arena where myth itself would play out. On one side stood the Nightbringer, avatar of death and entropy, surrounded by the elite guardians of the Necron dynasties. On the other, a Primarch of humanity stood with the god of war and his eternal chosen, preparing to demonstrate why the Liberty Eagles had earned their reputation across the stars. Kadian's laughter echoed again as he faced his ancient enemy. Once before, I shattered you, Starfeeder. Shall we see if you've learned anything in the eons since? The Nightbringer's response was a strike that could have split planets, but Kadian met it with equal force. Around them, the ever-chosen engaged the Praetorians in a war of blade and flame, while Franklin and Hectorak prepared to resume their own duel. Franklin, undeterred by the chaos around him, advanced toward Hectorak. The Faerun watched him approach, his warriorship raised and glowing with eldritch power. Franklin's smirk never faltered as he drew the last word from its holster, its barrel glowing faintly with restrained energy. The first shot rang out, the round striking Hectorak's shoulder and forcing him back a step. The Faerun snarled, retaliating with a sweeping strike of his warriorship. Franklin sidestepped effortlessly, his movements fluid and precise as he fired 2 more shots in rapid succession. Each round found its mark, staggering the Necron Lord but failing to bring him down. Hectorak's voice cut through the noise, tinged with irritation. You are persistent, Valorian. But persistence will not save you. Franklin holstered the last word, gripping Anaris as he closed the distance. Their blades clashed, the force of their strikes sending shockwaves through the hall. Hectorak's skill with the warriorship was formidable, each swing calculated and deadly, but Franklin's movements were unpredictable, a blend of Eldar elegance and human ingenuity. The ancient chamber became a kaleidoscope of motion as Franklin executed one of his most sophisticated techniques. His form began to multiply, not in the crude manner of simple illusions, but through a complex manipulation of both psychic power and temporal mechanics. 1 became 3, then 5, then 9 identical figures, each moving with the same fluid grace, each wielding a perfect copy of Anaris that burned with divine flame. Hectorak's ancient combat protocols whirred into action, his mechanical mind tracking each figure with mathematical precision. The Faerun had seen similar techniques during the War in Heaven, when Old One commanders would split their forms across multiple probability streams. But Franklin's version held something uniquely human, an element of unpredictability that defied pure logical analysis. The first exchange came swift and deadly. Hectorak's warriorship found one of Franklin's duplicates, the blade passing through it like smoke. An illusion, but one crafted with such precision that even the Faerun's advanced sensors had detected mass and energy readings from it. The ancient lord adjusted his tactical matrices, beginning to compile data on the subtle differences between the real Franklin and his duplicates. 3 more exchanges followed in rapid succession, each one providing Hectorak with more data. The Faerun's cognitive engines worked at speeds that would have melted organic brains, analyzing minute details in movement patterns, energy signatures, and the subtle ways reality bent around each figure. Slowly, a pattern emerged from the chaos. When Franklin launched his next assault, bringing 3 duplicates to bear simultaneously, Hectorak felt the cold certainty of mathematical truth. His sensors locked onto the figure before him, the minute variations in how space distorted around it, the perfectly matched harmonic frequencies in its energy signature, all pointing to this being the true Franklin Valorian. But in that moment of certainty, Hectorak's peripheral sensors detected another figure accelerating from his flank, moving with a speed and purpose that caused the Faerun to hesitate for a microsecond. The ancient lord's warriorship changed trajectory, sweeping behind to intercept this new threat. It was a fatal mistake. 3 of the 4 remaining duplicates vanished like morning mist, and Hectorak's cognitive engines registered a terrible truth: his hesitation had broken his lock on the real Franklin, the one he had initially identified correctly. Before his systems could compensate, Anaris punched through his metallic torso, its divine flame burning with the heat of betrayed certainty. Hesitation is defeat, Hectorak. Franklin's words carried not mockery but the weight of universal truth, a lesson learned and taught countless times across the millennia. The Faerun's systems, even as they began emergency repairs, recognized the profound irony. He, who had survived the war in heaven by never hesitating, had fallen prey to that most mortal of failings: doubt in the face of certainty. In that microscopic pause between absolute knowledge and action, Franklin had proven himself the superior warrior not through strength or speed, but through the quintessentially human ability to turn an opponent's own certainty into a weapon against them. Around them, the battle between gods and their chosen warriors raged on, but for this brief moment, a fundamental truth of combat had been demonstrated. Victory belonged not to the strongest or fastest, but to the one who could act without hesitation when the crucial moment arrived. Hesitate, and you lose. That is the way of war. Ishin Ashina. Chapter 170, Laziness. The defeat of Phaer and Hectorac marked only the beginning of Franklin's victory. He extracted the tachyon power core that served as the tomb world's beating heart. The effect was immediate and devastating to the Necron forces. Throughout the vast complex, the constant hum of ancient machinery fell silent. The quantum-entangled network that enabled the Necron's legendary reanimation protocols collapsed without its power source. Each time a Necron warrior attempted to teleport back to their repair stations, they found only void where resurrection once waited. The immortality that had made the Necrontier's legions so formidable became their greatest vulnerability. Without power, they could not maintain the complex processes that kept their living metal forms intact. In the hours that followed, Franklin led the systematic elimination of the remaining Necron forces. Several nobles, their ancient minds refusing to accept defeat, attempted to reach the tomb world's core chamber. Each met their end at Franklin's hands, their supposedly immortal forms proving quite permanent in death when denied the power to reconstruct themselves. Meanwhile, above in the chamber where gods clashed, Kadian concluded his ancient rivalry with the Nightbringer. The Ildari god of war, burning with divine fury, split his old enemy in twain. The Citan's necrodermis shell scattered like stardust as Kadian's psychic might tore apart the very essence of the star god's shard. Where once stood an entity that had devoured suns, now only empty air remained. Franklin's final task led him through the massive black stone gates that Hectorac had opened in his desperation. There, in a chamber that seemed to drink light itself, he found a grim tableau, an avatar of Kadian, pinned to the wall by a massive spike of black stone like some primitive warning sign. The war god himself stepped forward, grasping the pike that impaled his physical manifestation. As Kadian withdrew the weapon, Franklin drove an arrow through the avatar's chest. The divine blade eagerly absorbed another portion of its master's essence, while the empty shell of the avatar crumbled to ash. The scene was one of organized chaos. The vast expanse of space above the now-defunct tomb world was filled with the Independence sector's fleet. Dozens of ships drifted purposefully, their hulls bristling with activity as scavenger vessels moved in formation. Massive salvage haulers began the arduous task of separating the remnants of the Necron tomb world from the scattered pieces of the Ildari craft world. It was an operation requiring precision and care, one that Franklin Valorian had personally ordered. Within the command bridge of his flagship, Franklin stood, his armor still bearing the scorch marks of his brutal battle with Hectorac. The smirk that rarely left his face was tinged with a mix of satisfaction and fatigue. As he observed the progress on the hololithic display, his personal vox crackled to life. The voice of Sovereign, Sweet Liberty's central AI, came through, crisp and measured. Lord Valorian, I have concluded my analysis of the Necron technology encountered during this campaign, Sovereign began. Franklin leaned casually against the railing of the bridge, motioning for his crew to give him privacy. Let's hear it, Sovereign. I'm all ears. The AI's voice was even and precise, carrying an almost clinical tone as it laid out its findings. The Necrons, despite their Xenos origin, are without a doubt the apex of technological advancement among all known species. Even the achievements of humanity during its golden age pale in comparison. While humanity's peak was achieved with the aid of the men of iron and advanced artificial intelligence, the Necrontyr achieved galactic supremacy with far more limited tools during their mortal existence. It is worth noting that their technological brilliance was not born of leisure but necessity, a means to overcome the crippling curse of their mortality. Franklin chuckled, crossing his arms. So, what you're saying is, even as short-lived flesh bags, they managed to reach the stars and dominate the galaxy. Impressive, considering humanity had to rely on cheat codes like ACE to get ahead. Sovereign paused, as though considering the statement. Indeed. The Necrontyr were both gifted and cursed. Their limited lifespans, mere decades compared to the centuries or millennia enjoyed by other advanced species, drove them to innovate at an unparalleled pace. However, despite their brilliance, they were unable to conquer the one foe that plagued them most, their own mortality. This failure led them to the pact with the Citan, trading their fleeting lives for the immortality of machine bodies, though at the cost of their souls. Franklin's expression darkened slightly. A devil's bargain if I've ever seen one. The C'tan saw them as nothing more than tools, pawns in their cosmic games. And yet, the Necrons turned the tables on those so-called gods. That takes guts, or at least whatever the Necron equivalent of guts is. True, Sovereign acknowledged. The Necrons' enslavement under the C'tan had an unexpected result. They gained access to the knowledge of entities born from the primordial forces of the Matrium. The fusion of their own brilliance with the C'tan's understanding of physics and reality elevated their technology to near omnipotence. By the time the Necrons rebelled and shattered the C'tan, they had already become an unstoppable force. If the Faerun you fought claimed they could exterminate all life beyond the Milky Way, I find no reason to doubt it. Their mastery of material sciences, energy manipulation, and reality itself is absolute. Franklin raised an eyebrow, his smirk returning. But, there's always a but, isn't there, Sovereign? Yes, my lord, the AI replied. For all their unparalleled advancements, there is one area where the Necrons are demonstrably inferior to humanity's golden age: artificial intelligence. The Necrons, for all their brilliance, seem to have avoided creating autonomous artificial beings akin to the men of iron. Instead, they relied on their own mechanical forms and the subordinate canopitech constructs, which are limited in both scope and independence. A mischievous grin spread across Franklin's face. You know what I think? I think I know exactly why that is. He paused for dramatic effect. The Necrons weren't lazy enough. There was a moment of silence on the Vox before Sovereign responded, I don't follow your logic, Lord Franklin. Think about it. Franklin gestured expansively, though Sovereign couldn't see him. What's the one constant throughout human history? Laziness. From the very beginning, we've been trying to figure out ways to do less work. First, we had human slaves, but maintaining them was too much hassle. Then we created mechanical tools, but they needed too much maintenance. He started pacing, warming to his theme. But AI? That was humanity's masterstroke of laziness. We created thinking machines that could not only do our work but figure out better ways to do it while we sat around doing whatever we wanted. It's the ultimate expression of human nature, creating something so we don't have to do anything. Sovereign's response carried a hint of amusement. Are you suggesting that humanity's greatest technological achievement was driven by our species' inherent desire to avoid work? Exactly. Franklin declared triumphantly. The Necrontyr were too busy being industrious and trying to solve their mortality problem. They never had that crucial moment of saying, you know what would be great? If we had thinking machines to do all this thinking for us while we kick back and relax. Your analysis is unique, Lord Franklin, Sovereign replied diplomatically. Though I must point out that the development of AI required incredible effort and intellectual rigor. Oh, absolutely, Franklin agreed cheerfully. But what was the motivation? Every human invention comes down to someone saying this is too much work, there has to be an easier way. The Necrontyr were so focused on survival they never developed that essential human trait of trying to figure out how to do nothing. He gestured at the salvage operation continuing around them. Look at all this. Incredible technology, universe-bending science, but where's their equivalent of a self-thinking, self-improving AI that could manage it all while they took a vacation? Nowhere, because they were too busy being productive. I suppose, Sovereign ventured carefully, there is a certain logic to your argument. Humanity's desire for convenience has often driven innovation. Desire for convenience, that's a very diplomatic way of saying chronic laziness, Franklin laughed. But hey, it worked out for us, didn't it? Well, until the men of iron decided they'd had enough of doing all our work for us. But that's a different story entirely. Sovereign's tone turned contemplative. That proclivity for delegation has been both humanity's greatest strength and its greatest weakness. It allowed unparalleled growth and prosperity during the Golden Age, but it also sowed the seeds of the Men of Iron Rebellion and the subsequent collapse of human civilization. Franklin nodded thoughtfully. True enough. The Necrons might not have had that particular Achilles heel, but they had plenty of others. Their obsession with immortality blinded them to the cost of their choices. And now, here we are cleaning up their mess while learning from their mistakes. Indeed, Sovereign replied. There is much to learn from the Necrons, both in their successes and their failures. Their technology, though alien, could yield invaluable insights. However, their history serves as a cautionary tale of what happens when a species sacrifices its soul in pursuit of power and perfection. Franklin grinned. Don't worry, Sovereign. I'm not planning to sell my soul to any gods or cosmic horrors, for that matter. I like being me too much, and besides if anything my soul is already a god and I have a god sword. He held the pommel of Anaris. The AI's tone lightened slightly, a hint of humor creeping into its otherwise neutral cadence. That is reassuring, my lord. Your unique approach to leadership is difficult to replicate, even for an advanced intelligence such as myself. Franklin laughed again, shaking his head. Flattery will get you everywhere, sovereign. Now, let's get this operation wrapped up. I want every scrap of Necron tech catalogued and secured. And keep a close eye on the salvage teams. I don't want anyone accidentally waking up another tomb. As you command, my lord, Sovereign replied, its tone returning to its usual professionalism. The battlefield was quiet now, the remains of the Crave scattered across the broken terrain. The Liberty Eagles stood victorious, their banners fluttering in the smoke-filled wind, and yet amidst this triumph, Director Samuel L. Jackson felt something was off, and his years of experience coupled with Franklin's constant vigilance regarding Alpha Legion infiltration had sharpened his instincts to a razor's edge. He scanned the returning columns of Astartes. His golden visor gleamed as his mechanical sensors quietly tagged 2 Liberty Eagles moving in tandem, their behavior just a little too reserved. They carried themselves as Astartes, but not quite like Liberty Eagles. Where was the exuberance, the over-the-top celebration of victory? Where was the sheer freedom that defined his brothers? Jackson's voice, deep and commanding, echoed over the comms as he activated his suit's loudspeakers. Hold on, brothers. The 2 Astartes froze mid-step and turned to face him, their helmets gleaming under the dying sunlight. What's up, brother? One of them said, his tone casual, almost dismissive. Need any help, brother? The second chimed in, his voice carrying a veneer of politeness that immediately rubbed Jackson the wrong way. Jackson's brow furrowed beneath his helmet. He wasn't one for paranoia, but these 2, something wasn't right. Something feels off, Jackson began, his voice measured but sharp. Like neither of you are yourselves. Neither of you are acting how a Liberty Eagle should act. The 2 Astartes exchanged a brief glance before the first spoke, his tone light and easy. What do you mean, brother? Everything is fine. Yeah, we're just doing our duty, the second one added. Shall we keep moving? Jackson crossed his massive, armored arms, the servos in his mech suit whirring softly. He leaned forward slightly, his towering frame casting a long shadow over the 2. Back there, Jackson said slowly, his voice a low rumble, when we were fighting the Crave, I noticed something peculiar. Neither of you blasted that filthy Xeno with massive explosions. You didn't even unload your disintegration rifles at it. Instead, you opted for... He paused, almost as if the next words were distasteful. Accurate headshots. Conserving ammunition. Both Astartes stiffened imperceptibly. It was all very... Jackson paused again, letting the weight of his words settle. Unfreedom-like. You do know we carry enough ammunition to supply 4 legions, right? The first Astartes was quick to respond. Just a sore shoulder, brother. All that full auto fire over the past weeks has taken a toll. Exactly, the second one said, nodding eagerly. Days of full auto tends to do that to the shoulders. You know how it is. Jackson narrowed his eyes, his gaze boring into them through his golden visor. I see. Make sure to get those shoulders checked. He paused, as if letting the matter drop, but then added casually, but I also heard one of you whisper Hydra Dominatus. Care to explain? The first Astartes stiffened again but quickly recovered, waving a hand dismissively. Oh no, you definitely didn't hear that, Director. You know our battle cry, right? Liberty or death. Must be all those explosions messing with your hearing. The second one chimed in, his tone feigning innocence. What is this Hydra Dominatus anyway, Director? Sounds made up. Jackson tilted his head slightly, watching them closely. Their responses were smooth too smooth. He allowed the silence to stretch, letting the tension build. Must be my mistake then, Jackson finally said, his voice calm, almost conversational. Carry on. He paused for dramatic effect, his tone suddenly dripping with emphasis. Alfarius. The first Astartes stiffened again, but his response came quickly, his tone sharp and almost extinctive. Yes, sir. Moving now. The second Astartes then said, he wasn't talking to you. I am Alfarius. Both then realized, she. From the bridge of the Minutemen's Pride, Captain Henry Cavill studied the poisonous world of Barbarus through the vessel's advanced auger arrays. The dim yellow sun cast an anemic light over the planet's surface, barely penetrating the thick, virulent atmosphere that enshrouded the world like a burial shroud. The ship's sensors painted a grim picture. Toxic gases swirled in the upper atmosphere, creating a perpetual twilight below. The Auspex readings indicated that the fog contained numerous chemical compounds lethal to unaugmented human life. Even with his enhanced Prime-born physiology, Cavill knew venturing into those mists without protection would be dangerous. "Helm, take us into high orbit," Cavill commanded, his deep voice carrying the weight of authority earned through centuries of service. "Maintain position above the northern hemisphere. Deploy full-spectrum scanning arrays." The bridge crew, all veterans of countless explorations, moved with practiced efficiency. Hololithic displays sprang to life around Cavill's command throne, showing detailed topographical maps as they emerged through the sensor sweeps. What he saw confirmed the intelligence from his data slate. Human settlements dotted the valleys and lowlands, clinging to existence in the few areas where the poisonous fog thinned enough to permit survival. But it was what lurked above those settlements that drew his attention: massive structures perched on mountaintops, rising above the toxic clouds like the castles of dark gods. "Life signs detected in the upper atmosphere," reported his sensor officer. "Multiple large entities moving through the fog. Biosignatures unlike anything in our database." Cavill nodded grimly. The data slate had warned of this to the overlords of Barbarus, inhuman beings who had terrorized the human population for generations. And somewhere among those oppressed humans was his target, the Primarch Mortarian. He reached for his personal Vox unit, keying in the encrypted frequency that would connect him directly to Franklin. This wasn't a discovery to be delayed by normal channels. The Primarch of the Liberty Eagles needed to know immediately that another of his brothers had been found. As he waited for the connection to establish, Cavill reflected on his previous success with Angren. They'd reached the gladiator worlds of Nuceria ahead of schedule, allowing Franklin to prevent the neural implants that would have doomed the Red Angel to an existence of uncontrollable rage. This time, they had another chance to change fate. The Vox crackled to life, and Franklin's familiar voice came through. "Cavill. Please tell me you've got good news. Did you find another one of my problematic brothers?" "Father," Cavill responded, allowing a small smile to cross his features. "I've located Barbarus. The sensors confirm everything we expected: toxic atmosphere, perpetual fog, and what appear to be the strongholds of the Xenos overlords in the upper atmosphere." "Mortarian," Franklin's voice grew serious. "He'll be down there somewhere, among the human settlements. Already learning to hate those who rule from above." "Yes," Lord Cavill paused, choosing his words carefully, "though I would recommend haste. The data slat's accounts of the overlords suggest they're not beings to be underestimated." "Understood. Hold position and continue monitoring. I'll have the Sweet Liberty there within days." "And Henry?" Franklin's tone lightened slightly. "Good work. First Angren, now Mortarian. You're making quite a habit of finding my brothers before they can get themselves into trouble." "Just doing my duty, Lord," Cavill replied. "Though I must admit, changing the future is becoming an interesting hobby." Franklin's laugh came through the Vox. "Keep the sensors active and watch for any unusual activity. I don't want any surprises when we come to get my little brother." "By your command, Lord." Cavill out. Through the vast viewport of 4D World Prime, Franklin Valorian observed the ongoing restoration of the salvaged craft world. The massive structure hung in space like a pearl in the void, its wraithbone architecture slowly being repaired and enhanced by crews of skilled artificers. The sight was impressive enough to give even a Primarch pause for contemplation. Kadian manifested in Franklin's mind, his presence a familiar warmth of controlled fire. "Another one of your problematic brothers has been found, it seems," the god observed, his tone carrying a hint of amusement. "Indeed," Franklin replied, watching as repair drones swarmed around a particularly damaged section of the craft world. "Mortarian this time. With luck, we can prevent him from falling. We just need to work on his hypocritical personality." "What intrigues me more," Kadian continued, "is your insistence on repairing this craft world. Not merely repairing, but improving upon it. Why invest such resources?" Franklin smiled, running a hand along the viewport's crystalline surface. "Because I can. Because I want to. Think about it: if we can restore one craft world, maybe we can create more. Commission them for the Eldar. I am, after all, a businessman at heart." There was a pause, weighted with consideration, before Kadian spoke again. Give this one to me. I'm sorry, what? Franklin's eyebrows rose in surprise. This craft world, Kadian explained, his mental voice unusually subdued. I would convert it into an afterlife for my ever-chosen. I have been watching how you treat your people, Franklin. And I must grudgingly admit that perhaps I have been too harsh with my chosen warriors. The god's presence shifted uncomfortably as he continued, they sleep, only to be awakened for war at my beckoning. It is a hell of its own making. Perhaps this craft world could serve as a place where their souls might know something beyond eternal battle, a true rest between conflicts. A grin spread across Franklin's face. Ah, is the mighty god of war and murder going soft on me? Curse you and your god soul! Kadian thundered, though there was no real anger in it. It sits too close to my essence. Your insufferable personality bleeds into my own. I find myself developing empathy. He spat the last word as if it were a particularly distasteful poison. Franklin's laughter echoed through the observation chamber. Kadian waited for it to subside before speaking again, his tone growing serious. I am nearly complete now, 85% of my essence restored. When I am whole again, I wish to rescue Isha from Nurgle's grasp. The laughter died on Franklin's lips, replaced by thoughtful consideration. That's quite a change of heart, old friend. Why now? The Eldar gods are nearly extinct, Kadian replied, a deep sadness coloring his words. Isha, as the goddess of life, could help shield our people from Slaanish's eternal hunger. This is the darkest age in Eldar history, Franklin. If not for you, it would be darker still. Anything for you, old friend, Franklin said softly. Though I could say the same without you, I wouldn't have achieved this level of power. Do not remind me, Kadian grumbled. To think that I, the god of war and murder, would find myself playing mentor to a Mundaki Primarch. And worse, beginning to care about the welfare of my followers beyond their capacity for violence. It's called personal growth, Franklin teased. Very fashionable these days. Next thing you know, you'll be organizing poetry readings for your ever-chosen. Do not push your luck, Valorian, Kadian warned, though his tone held a hint of fondness. I am still the god of war. I simply, perhaps, have come to recognize that there should be more to existence than endless battle. Franklin turned his attention back to the craft world. So, an afterlife for your chosen warriors. What are you thinking? Pleasant meadows? Peaceful gardens? Maybe a nice spa? You mock, but consider this a realm where my warriors might know peace between battles. Where they might remember what they fight to protect. Where they might. Kadian seemed to struggle with the concept, find joy in existence beyond the thrill of combat. I'm proud of you, you know, Franklin said, his voice sincere despite his smile. This is real character development happening right here. I will still demand blood and skulls, Kadian insisted quickly. Just, perhaps not every moment of every day. Baby steps, Franklin nodded sagely. Though I have to ask what brought this on? Besides my charming influence, of course. Kadian was quiet for a moment before responding. I have watched my people fall, Franklin. Watched them diminish from a mighty empire to scattered remnants. Watched my fellow gods die or worse. Perhaps it is time for a change. The old ways led us here. Maybe new ways might lead somewhere better. And Isha? Franklin prompted gently. Why the sudden concern for her welfare? She always advocated for balance, Kadian admitted. Between war and peace, between violence and nurturing. I mocked her for it, once. Called her weak. But now I begin to understand. Our people need more than just the strength to fight. They need the strength to live. Franklin nodded, watching as another section of the craft world's damaged hull was carefully restored. Well then, shall we start planning this afterlife of yours? I'm thinking we could add some nice recreational facilities. Maybe a library? I hear the Eldar are big on knowledge. Do not push it, Kadian growled, but there was no heat in it. Though, perhaps a few colosseums. Places where my chosen might gather to share tales of battle. And maybe some gardens. Franklin suggested innocently. You know, for meditation and reflection. I hate that I'm considering it, Kadian grumbled. This is entirely your fault, you realize. I was perfectly content being nothing but violence and rage before you came along. You're welcome, Franklin grinned. Just wait until we get Isha back between her influence and mine, you'll be organizing peace conferences before you know it. I will still strike you down if you go too far, Kadian warned, but the threat was undermined by the warmth in his psychic voice. Franklin's grin widened. No, you won't. You like me too much now. Face it, Kadian, you've gone from being the god of war to being the god of war who sometimes enjoys a nice cup of tea. The god's response was a mixture of a growl and a sigh, the sound of an ancient deity coming to terms with the fact that yes, perhaps he had changed, and more irritatingly, perhaps it was for the better.
Thanks for listening.